You're going to sing the national anthem? Sure. Not here, buddy. So good to see everyone. Let's see if we can, well, one comment before we start, that this is a special board meeting. It's not one of our what we call a regular board meeting, so we're just going to, we have a couple items on tonight's agenda, and we will be sticking to this agenda. With that, I'll look to the trustees to see if someone would like to make a motion to approve the agenda. Anybody? Trustee Nell, Trustee Aguirre, all in favor? That's 6-0, and I should add also that we are going to, Trustee Scott will not be joining us this evening. She has medical emergency.
If it's medical, we should excuse her?
It's not medical, then let's just say. She's not going to be with us tonight. All right, so approve the agenda, public comment. I don't have any blue cards. I can go get one. Would you like to come up and say anything?
I'd like to answer a question.
Yeah.
I didn't see on here, and I know that we're working on an IT, item for IT that was coming forward to us, and I didn't know if it was gonna make this agenda now. I don't see it on here, so I assume it didn't have access to the, so it's on the next agenda. Okay, good.
Next agenda, the 20th. Since this is a special meeting, no, it would probably be on the 20th then. Is that? Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure I hadn't missed anything.
I do have one more comment before we get to approval of consent. On item 6, what I'd like to do, staff reports, we have them as the agenda is written. It's A through C, and then we have public hearings. So staff reports and then public hearings. I'd like to group the public hearings that are associated with each one of those staff reports right after. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Without revision of the order of business, I'll approve the order of business for tonight.
Thank you for doing that. Second, all in favor? 6 in favor and 1 absent. All right, great. So next up is approval of the consent agenda. Any member like to approve that? Deputy Trustee Butler, all second. Trustee Mack, all in favor? Passes 6-0, 6 in favor and 1 absent. All right, and public comment on agenda items, seeing none, we're going to move right into our first staff report, which is the 2017-18 Local Control Accountability Plan, and our Director of Instruction and Innovation, Julia Kemke. Welcome.
Thank you. So I've been instructed to leave the L cap on for at least the beginning parts. So we are pleased to present with you the 2017-2018 LCAP. I'm going to try to move, I have quite a few slides just because I'm trying to move you through a 92-page document, trying to give you the broad overview of the document. We also have the short version that will cover more in depth, but essentially the new LCAP, we talked a little bit about this in, here's my partner.
It's game time.
We talked a little bit about this in February, about one of the big processes that we had to go through is transfer all the data from the old template into a new one. So if you're curious on how that looks, here's a graphic. I'm not going to go into it in depth, but we will go through each portion and talk about how we've outlined the LCAP for this year. So again, this is the 3rd year that we've been doing the LCAP, so just a reminder that it is a requirement that we're hitting 8 state priorities through the process of identifying our goals and have metrics that meet those priorities. 1 through 8 are what are applicable to us. And then each one of those state priority areas have associated metrics with them, which you'll see once Yvonne gets to the later part talking about each one of our goals, on how those metrics match up with each one of the priority areas and our goals. So the overview of the LCAP, like I said, we're going to go through this 92-page document. There's some nice new areas of it that kind of provide a narrative overview of what the district is doing and try to give you more of a story that goes along with the LCAP than all of the data that's in there as well. So the first portion talks about our story, and one of the nice things about the new template, it does allow you to upload images. So in our story, I think the big thing that we talk about is the demographics, the students we serve, and then the major initiatives. And we really focused on the two major initiatives being the Equity Imperative Declaration as being one of the major things that we're doing in our district for all students, and it covers a lot of different actions and services, and then the graduate profile. Those two things we outline as being the ways that we're meeting all of the students' needs. So we're making sure that we're doing an equitable, engaging, rigorous, relevant education, and that's the way that we know that we'll close that opportunity gap. And then we highlight a few of the different programs in our school, from MSA to STEM to all the great things that are happening at our elementary schools as well. So that's the first story, and I think Jim usually tells it pretty well, so we have a picture of him telling a story to some elementary school students last week. The highlights, again, is a narrative portion that talks about what are the major things that are brought up in each one of the stakeholder engagement meetings that we have as really making an impact on our students, either through the survey or through the data that we take a look at. Them being our mental health counselors, that is improved services that we give above and beyond what a normal school district offers. Bilingual community liaisons, our instructional coaches, and strategic professional learning, you'll see is grouped in there. Our AVID program, our summer programs for English learners, and then the access to intervention software. So again, we'll go a little bit more in depth on how these are increased and improved services, because that's one of the major points of the LCAP, is to give us an idea of how we're increasing or improving services for our low-income English learner and foster youth. The next portion, again, I'm going to have to take my hat off. It's going to make me too hot. The greatest progress in the review of the California dashboard. So for the next few portions, you take a look at the California dashboard, and they're updating it literally daily. I looked at it last week, and we were making some of that written narrative based on what the data was in there last week, and it changed when I looked at it over the weekend, in a good way for us. So I will make some of those changes to the narrative before we do the final adoption next week, and I'll speak to what those look like in just a second. So just a reminder, somebody explained this to look like a Trivial Pursuit game. So they kind of look like the pieces of the Trivial Pursuit. So you're doing really well when you're blue, meaning that you're in the highest category. Your suspension rate is below everybody in the state. Green means that you're, again, quite high. When you move into yellow, orange, or red as a district, you need to begin to address those very specifically. As a district, we are not in the yellow, orange, or red for any of our major areas as a whole. So some of the good things that we're doing, and this is what we talk about in the review of progress part of it, is that our English language learner progress, this is kind of what we used to call the reclassification rate. They now call the English learner progress. It's priority 4. It's one that is mandatory that you cover as part of the LCAP. It shows us right now that 71% of NUSD English learners are making 1 year's worth of growth. That is district-wide. We do have some schools that we need to take a closer look at what's happening there, because not all schools are making that same rate of growth. But as a district, we can say that this is quite a good measure of progress. Our suspension rate is quite low. 2.7% of NUSD students were suspended, and this is a decline of 0.4%. And then our graduation rate, quite high for all of our student groups as well, from our English learners to our Hispanic students to our African American students, which are some of the ones that I'll later talk about that we do have some areas to grow in. So 96.5% of our students are graduating. So that's very high. So that's why it is blue. We're doing quite well in that area. So this is what I was mentioning about the review on needs or performance gaps. If you have the full LCAP, it's on page 6. And the performance gap and the greatest needs, if we had any of the areas for the district that were yellow or red, we would have to make some very specific indications on how we are going to prove it. Unlike some districts, we do not have a huge amount of students that are low-income English learners compared to other districts. So there's stuff that's hidden in this. Remember, this was called the equity report, but then we start digging in, we see some of our student groups aren't doing as well. So for that reason, we look like we're doing really well, but if we're being, like, taking a really closer look at ourselves, we do have some groups, and I'll talk about them just in a minute, that we need to start addressing, and we do feel like we do that with some of the actions and services in the LCAP. So these are the students groups that we know are the furthest from opportunity. The student group that we were most concerned about last week was our African American students, and actually each one of those indicators was red. So we've seen a bit of an improvement from last week to this week. As a reminder, when it's red for the SBAC, that means their distance from level 3, which is meaning that student group's meeting the standard. So right now, they're quite a bit of distance on average from meeting the standard in ELA, as well as in math for African American students. And then their suspension rate is high compared to the rest of our students groups. Students with disabilities, orange with ELA, math, and the suspension rate as well. So again, an area of concern, and we definitely need to find some more strategic strategies to address the students with disabilities. And then our English learners, as a district, they are from a level 3, yellow meaning that they haven't declined significantly, but they're still a distance from level 3. So what we talk about during that narrative is that we have the Kevin Clark, which is a large portion of how we're spending the supplemental money, are the ELD strategies, the National Equity Project, and our new partner with Epic Education, with Nancy Dome, who's going to focus with our elementary schools. A lot of those strategies are going to work with our African American students. And then our students with disabilities, we've acknowledged this is a big area of need, and focusing our instructional coaches on differentiating and making sure that there's some differentiation happening in the classes, as well as ensuring that there's some restorative practices based on the suspension rates of both those groups.
Is this data updated because of the 2017?
Yes.
Why you saw the change? Okay,
Yeah, so
as it gets loaded in, it's
I
adjusting.
guess so. I didn't see any big announcement that it had changed, but we
You
noticed it.
Yeah, so I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is good news. In general, we're moving in the right direction. So again, we're going to talk a little bit more about the strategies, but all of the strategies that we talk about are focused within the classroom. So we can do a lot of stuff outside of the classroom, but we really want to see the improvement of curriculum and instruction, and that's why you see a lot of our supplemental money is going towards that. Instructional coaches, the contracts with these different organizations are important to target what's happening in the classroom, because what traditionally districts do is they say, well, there's something wrong with these students, so we must do all the stuff around what's happening in the classroom, instead of saying we need to do something different in the classroom so that they meet their academic, they are able to be academically successful. So this is getting cut off a little bit too. So essentially what this slide shows you is that we're required to include the whole budget in the LCAP, even though we tend to focus on the supplemental portion. And what I'm showing you here is essentially how we chunked it out. So we worked with business to chunk it out in a way that makes the most sense. It's different from what we've seen in years past slightly, so I just want to make mention to that. So in Goal 1, you'll see all the teachers, site administrators, EL coordinators, student services, athletics, any instructional support staff, clerical, maintenance, operations are all going towards that Goal 1. And Yvonne will talk a little bit about how that's hitting each one of the priorities that we need to hit with that. Goal 2 is basically all the district administrators, curriculum instruction, materials support, instructional coaches, and then Goal 3 has community liaisons, translation, interpretation, PK or any parent in education services, Leslie and her whole department, food services, and then the food services contribution. So that's just acknowledging to you that it's chunked out in fairly large portions within the LCAP itself, and this is how it's chunked out. The only ones that we really call out specifically in terms of more detailed strategies are the ones that are around the supplemental, and that's what we're required to do. The next portion, and we've talked about this, is how do we engage stakeholders and consult them as part of the planning process. So we again used our district advisory committee, who met several times over the year as our LCAP advisory committee. DLAC provided input. We surveyed student, staff, and parents, parent leadership groups, school and district staff. And then from all of those different meetings, we had some, how they influenced our LCAP was we simplified the metrics. Last year we had a whole lot and it was overwhelming. There's no way for us to really track how well we were doing on those goals. We're gonna create a more systematic needs assessment that we can check in with more frequently through the year. Opportunities for more parent education, so moving beyond PKs, identifying other ways that we can provide parents with education. Increase the work of the P3 grant, so that's EPIC education that's in there. Strengthen ways to increase student voice and choice and mentoring program. Continue to have the line item around seeking and hiring, not just bilingual educators, but more educators of color. That was one of the things that a lot of the feedback was coming back. And then another huge one that came from the students and the parents around what they wanted to see is that it's really important to them that they have positive relationships with teachers, and that the classroom culture is probably one of the #1 things that makes a difference of whether or not a kid's successful. So again, that kind of reiterated our emphasis around project-based learning, which creates a culture where the teacher can have a relationship with students. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Yvonne, who's going to talk about each one of the goals.
All right, good evening. Thank you. Awesome work, Julia and the team. This definitely took a village to do, with Julia leading the way. So the first goal is student success, the how and the what of, how do we make this happen for our students? What you see here is, on the next slide, the next 8 slides, I'm gonna quickly go over what are the metrics, how do they align to the state priorities, and then what are the actions and services. So here on student success, you'll quickly see these are the state required metrics. We also have our own metrics internally, such as the MAP, the measures of academic performance. We also have our MARS tasks. So we have other measures on top of these so that we can quickly, locally be able to measure the progress of our students. And we're continuing to right now develop the rubrics around the C's, communication, collaboration, and this next year, critical thinking. So what you see here is, the priorities 1 through 8. On the next slide is the actions and services for Goal 1 around student success. We did not put all the actions and services. What you'll notice under Goal 1, this is the biggest part of actions and services in the LCAP. The ones that we put up here are the ones that are the big dollar items. So right away with mental health counselors, what we need to remember is when we talk about student achievement means addressing the needs of the students academically on this, right? But also social, emotional, because if you have a student that's not doing well socially, emotionally, how are they gonna focus academically? Makes no sense. So we really gotta focus on the whole child. So that's a huge investment to make sure that we're supporting our students on both sides of the social, emotional, and the academic side. AVID, I'm a huge believer in AVID. I've seen it. It's the one that closes the achievement gap, transforms the lives of students, families. We continue to work with expanding our ELD program, getting our kids to use that academic language. And then Camp University is another big item to develop those skills. This Monday, we start over at Hamilton with 250 English learners. We'll have them for about 5 weeks to close, to get them ready so that we don't have that summer slide, right? Goal 2, staff success. So around staff success, what are we doing to really support our teachers, but also not only our teachers, but also our classified staff as well. So what are we doing for all staff, including administrators? So what we see here is the metrics and the priorities. So you'll see the SBAC data, the coaches support, and PD effectiveness. We use surveys for that. We're looking at turnover rate. So that's a big focus. We really want to retain our teachers. And also our teacher leaders, for example, that are at our sites. Keep on wanting to press. So actions and services for goal number 2. So instructional coaches, training, modeling, supporting our teachers. This right here, the work that we do every day, we could not do without our coaches. There's just no way. I'll give you a quick example. Today, awesome day in NUSD. At Lou Sutton, we had, I'm not going to make up the numbers, but we had about 10 classrooms full of teachers focused on the next generation science standards, led by our coaches. Over at Novato High, we had the 1-2 World. We had our 5th, 6th, and 9th grade teachers leading the training for the 1-2 World technology program. Downstairs here, we had 2 of our coaches helping out with PBL 101, and then upstairs we had PBL 201. So this is a great investment and sustainability for long term, because to train our teachers and pay thousands of dollars and mileage and hotel, it's not going to work. So we need to develop, grow our own, and have our own capacity in-house. So this is a great investment. Clark Consulting and Training, we're going to go deep this year with our elementary. This year, the board approved designated ELD, which is going to happen every day, which is going to be a game changer to improve our scores of our English learners and also help continue to grow the redesignation rate. Assessments and accountability. Hope is not a strategy. We got to use data. You have to use data. You have to have systems in place to measure that and make those data-driven decision making. National Equity Project, it's also going to doing a lot of work around biases, around cultural responsiveness, and BIE, that's focus on PBL, but most important, focus on differentiated instruction, on how do we teach all students with disabilities, students with 504, students who are English learners, students who are GATE, just all kinds of students, and it's not easy, so we need to focus on training. Goal number 3, community involvement. The 3 measures that we have there again, we're continuing to increase participation in the LPAC, getting survey, getting that input, educating our parents. It's a huge investment. The actions and services here are our community liaisons. I will tell you, when I was a high school principal, the first thing I did in the first week was hire a community liaison for our school. It was, it was a game changer because her office was next to my office. Just to engage the parents, everything with parents and the community is huge to, as we're working with our students and staff. Translation interpretation services, continue to provide that. And then PIQE is our Parent Institute for Quality Education. Again, providing those trainings for our families so that they have an influence at home and then at school. All right, so demonstration of increased and improved services. So this right here is one of the state requirements that we have at least a 7.03% proportionality state requirement. So what this means is an increase in services, the quantity. So what we're doing right now is we're increasing by having more AVID sections, more ELD, the EL coordinator, and then our community liaison. So those costs are going up. In terms of the improve, which is a quality, this year we're going to, and this has a impact on all students, is around project-based learning, equity work, and then our mental health counselors. So this right here demonstrates our meeting our proportionality state requirement. Questions and comments?
All right, trustees, questions, comments? Debbie?
Just a comment. I like this format much better. How about you guys? Are you, yeah.
Yes.
It's more user-friendly, I think. I can really see exactly what we're doing. It's gotten better and better each year, and I like everything that you've put in here. It's great. So, thank you so much. Thank you, Julia, for all the work.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Trustee Miller?
In this next year, we're gonna fold in one-on-one instruction, one-to-world in grades 5, 6, and 9. How does it affect this program and these goals? Is there a crossover, or have you figured out how those grades are gonna be different in meeting these objectives?
No, it's going to actually help enhance meeting the objectives, because now our students, specifically in those grades, are not going to have the entire world in front of them at their fingertips to be able to do any type of quick research to develop that, even academic language and view academic language, view words. And so we're integrating technology into everything we do, even in our training. So I see it as a tool. This is a tool to help our students. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Mack?
Just a quick question, the slide before this, I don't know what page it is, but anyway,
Which one?
but the slide, I'm sorry, the one after that, the 7.03%, can you explain the proportionality state requirement? I'm not sure.
Yes, I'll have our CBO,
Okay.
7.03.
So with a lot of things with the local control funding formula, they'll be a lot easier to understand once it's fully implemented. But your minimum proportionality percentage means that you're doing at least whatever percent, and in our case, 7.03% improved or additional services. So it's not a particular dollar amount that you necessarily, like a categorical program used to be. We have to show that we're doing 7% more or better, and it's qualitative or quantitative. Once it gets to full implementation, it'll be a little bit easier, because just like the gap percentage drives our money, it also drives our increase in our MPP, as they call it. So.
Anybody else?
I'll just say one more thing about that. If you look at page 73, so that people actually look at the document, you can see how we've rationalized how we're providing 7.03 or more percent improved or increased services. So we highlight each one of the things that Yvonne talked about right there. And so if you want more details about that one.
Good. That was at our fingertips, I know. Any other trustee Aguirre?
Will this be on the website, the new version?
Yes, so once we get any input from the public hearing from all of the folks that might be coming in, we'll make any updates, and then we'll have it translated, and then everything is posted to the website, along with any additional documentation that we have with this presentation, the short version that will be translated both in English and Spanish as well.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
And then number the pages, please, if you remember.
Oh,
What was
yeah.
that?
Page number 2.
Oh. All right. Well, I just wanted to say thank you very much for doing this. It's great, great work, and I know it took a long time. And I'm also happy to hear that, or glad to see when we make changes that it actually appears up on the state dashboard. It's good to know. So thank you very much. We're making good progress here. Yes, just Superintendent Hoogamooms.
So I would just like to make clear that what you just saw was Julia and Yvonne's. This summary is not the new format. As usual, the state over bureaucratizes everything. So The LCAP, as you saw, is now 94 pages long, which is totally ridiculous. In fact, we have to buy a software program so that we can implement this. So that's another example of the state taking a good idea, taking accountability, just like they used to do with every other form of accountability, and completely ruining it so that this staff has had to take weeks of time to prepare a 92-page report that even I haven't looked at the whole thing. It's ridiculous. And that's why, so this is what they've done to make it understandable. This is what makes sense. This is why we talk about the short version being, you know, what's a 10-page document similar to this that kind of summarizes the key strategies. I mean, the other problem that I have with the LCAP is that the county, and I guess most counties do this, we didn't do this in my last county, insists that your LCAP is your whole budget. I mean, to insist that the LCAP is our 80 million budget is ridiculous. What it should be is, the short version is the supplemental funds, the $4 million that we're using basically to implement these strategies. So I just want the board to be clear that these guys have done an awesome job with this. This isn't the new format is ridiculous. So whenever you see a state legislator, as usual, you can thank them for making it overly complex and turning what should be a really informative, important document into a 92-page document with all kinds of checks and balances that no one's going to look at, including our district advisory committee, because it's way too complicated. So, you know what I'm saying? So I really want to thank you guys for all the work you did, but just the ridiculous amount of time just shows what's wrong with the state running the thing.
Good point, and I hope somebody up there is listening. Yeah,
Actually,
yeah, right, that's
Wait,
exactly right.
to what extent can we?
Watching the meeting, that's why.
Yeah, right. Is there any extent we can share this kind of approach with the rest of the county and kind of start just grassroots? The short form, here it is.
Yeah, we do meet with the county, and we kind of review this with them as well. So, and I'm not actually serious. If I meet with Mike McGuire and some other state legislators, this will be one of the things on my list of a good idea that they just took to the nth degree, and you know.
Yes, Derek?
Everything was fine, and I'm very happy with the LCAP, and I've worked with the advisory committee earlier in the year a couple times. So, but did you just say we had to purchase a specialist software? What, from the state, or?
It's just a software that helps you write long bureaucratic documents.
It's called long bureaucratic software document?
LBC.
LBC. Okay, well, just curious about.
Some software developer.
I was hoping that the reason behind it was that the metrics inside the document were going to be automatically tabulated, and but
That would be a good reason to do the software.
okay. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no more comments, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Sorry? Just a minute. Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to, I just opened up the public hearing on the 2017-2018 Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP. And seeing no one in the audience that would like to comment, I don't believe. Would any of you like to comment? Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing on that item. And we're going to move on to our second staff report, 2017-18 Preliminary General Fund Budget, and our Assistant Superintendent, Yancey Hawkins. Hi.
All right, thank you. I'm a little worried if Jim's upset about a 94-page state report, then the 300-page state budget report is going to get a real tongue lashing. Thank you. So this is the first look at our proposed budget, but it's not the first time we've discussed this. We've been going over this from the interims to the preliminary budget assumptions that went and got passed by the board a little over a month ago till now. And the first thing I wanted to do was thank Nancy Walker and her team. She really is one of the best in the business. And there is a team, but there's no one that works harder than Nancy, and there's no one who does a better job. And I just wanted to thank you, Nancy. As we go, our budget is driven by our three goals and priority: student success, staff success, and community involvement, and our overarching goal of equity within the district. To go over a couple of budget themes, I think it's important to kind of look at, where we've been in the last couple of years, where we are now, and where we're going to be going moving forward. So, since the low after the Great Recession, and especially in the last 3 to 4 years, the district really has made some really impressive investments into our students' education, including attracting and retaining staff. Over the last 3 years, they've made almost approximately a 20% increase in total compensation, including salary, benefits, and contributions to retirement systems. We've got, they just talked about through our MPP, the significant increased services to our unduplicated pupils, and as well as all of our, maintaining our lower class size throughout, PBL, One to World, dual immersion, all the other great things that we're doing. So that's been happening over the last 3 to 4 years, really some great investments. But we are coming into some budget constraints. So the first is slowing increases in state income, and especially through our LCFF dollars. That relates to just a slowing economy at the state level. And we had some great years there, 14, 15, 15, 16, where we saw almost a 10% increase in our funding through the LCFF. And now we're slowing. One thing that's hurting that is also our declining enrollment. So, and even our slowed revenue growth from the state is being offset now by us declining in enrollment, and especially at the elementary level, which means, those students are not going to be here for 13 years instead of declining enrollment, say, at the high school level, where they would only not be with us for 4. And the other that we've talked in length about is the STRS and PERS increases. And that's, 1.5% to 2% a year, STRS being in law at 1.85% a year. And so those are putting some constraints on our budgets. Moving forward, and we'll get into why, we'll be reforming the Budget Advisory Committee and looking for some budget solutions that we can enact in the 17-18 year for the 18-19 budget. Just to go over, you have the whole list of the budget assumptions, but just a couple of key ones that I wanted to note. We're projecting 64 less students next year, but more importantly, because declining enrollment hits a year in arrears, they give you a year to hopefully deal with some of those things. Our funded ADA next year is going to decrease by about 96 students. And that puts a 2.5% increase in LCF entitlement per ADA to decrease to 1.18%. So the 1.18%, as just I'll note, is below even the 1.64 and 1.85% increase in PERS and STRS. So we're basically, before we have to pay any other increased costs, we're behind. In terms of staffing, we're staffing to formula, and because we have less students, we'll have less staffing, especially at the elementary level. I think it's important to note that a lot of that elementary staffing really relates to the reduction in students this year. So we reduced over 100 kids in elementary this year, and we actually only reduced 1 elementary teacher going into this year. So a lot of that relates to actually students who already were not here in the current year. We also do have a staffing reserve, though, going into the year, knowing that, we don't know where those kids don't come in nice packets of 24, 22 students. And so we might have to add a teacher here or there. So we have a staffing reserve for that. As we noted, STRS rate is going up by 1.85%, and the PERS rate will be going up by about 1.65%. That's before step and column costs related. As we noted, we've been, as declining enrollment goes, it's not a significant declining enrollment, but when the state revenue is slowing, any declining enrollment is gonna be difficult. In terms of the proposed budget, as I noted before, the LCFF, 78% of our revenue. Obviously, that's going to be the biggest driver of how we're doing from a revenue standpoint. So when we talk about slowing state revenue and we talk about declining enrollment, that's what it's going to affect, our LCFF revenue, which is the 78%. It's also important to note we are lucky to have the parcel tax in this district, about 5% of this revenue strictly through the support and generosity of our community. But that is a flat amount, and as our population actually ages, we're actually seeing a little bit of a decrease in that revenue each year. One other thing that is important to note in other local revenue, and you'll see it in your report, actually is a lot of special education revenue, and because of how the state likes to do some interesting things, the revenue comes through our County Office of Education, and so a big chunk of that is in there. In terms of expenditures, we're in a people business. 85% of our expenditures are in salaries and benefits, and obviously that's why the significant increase in the retirement contributions really impact us, because it's impacting 85% of our budget. Just a couple quick things to go over of the estimated actuals and the proposed budget. Nancy and her team have gone through and found some additional savings due to unfilled positions, some efficiencies, and some placements in our special education department, and going through that. And so she's come up and been able to pull about $500,000 of savings going into next year. So that's always good. And although it is one time, so. And then I think the most important number to be looking at in the 17-18 budget is that net decrease in fund balance of $2.9 million. I also think it's important to note that this is the first budget that we've seen in the last few years from the state that really is indicative of the district's fiscal position. There are not significant one-time revenues in this budget like there were in the last couple of years, and there are not significant one-time expenditures in your budget. So this is the first budget that we've seen from the state in a little while that is actually indicative of our actual ongoing budget situation. So $2.9 million. Almost three, absolutely. In terms of our proposed, at the end of the year, we are projecting our ending fund balance to be $9.5 million, about 11.3%. Of that, we have some restricted money. We have our 3% required reserve, and then we've set aside some additional money for LCFF gap funding, so that's out year funding of the increases in the LCFF, as well as a reserve for declining enrollment, as you'll see in a little bit. Just a couple quick multi-year projection assumptions that are important. We're projecting another decrease in enrollment of 112 students in 2018-19. Just an important thing to note, for 1920, we will get an additional enrollment study before that. It's important to note the reason we didn't put any change in enrollment was that we wouldn't take out any teacher salaries, and because declining enrollment hits 1 year in arrears, the enrollment won't impact the revenues for 2019-20. So when we get the updated enrollment study, we will add the 2019-20 information. It's also important to note after declining enrollment, 2018-19 sees a 3.11%, which seems okay, except for the almost 2% increase in PERS and STIRS, which will basically come right off the top. And then back in 2019-20, we're projected to be under that the 2%, 1.85 to 2% increase in PERS and STIRS rate. So we'll be behind the 8 ball again in 2019-20. So when we look at the multi-year projection, we see that $2.9 million, almost $3 million deficit moving ahead from 17-18 to 18-19. And then that deficit actually increases in 19-20, as I noted, with the only 1.41% increase in LCFF funding. And it requires a contribution from the PERS and STIRS fund that we just set up last year of $2 million to get us to our required reserve in the third out year. We've kind of looked at this, but this is an updated total cost of the retirement annual cost of $5.8 million by 2020-21 in additional retirement payments that we will be making each year. And as just to kind of put it in a visual, and I think it's important to note, and I don't have it here, so I'll note that we're here. Of the roughly a little under $6 million annual cost, we've gotten to $2 million of it. So we're about a third of the way there going in. And if you count this, we're about halfway there if we count 2017-18. Between 2017-18 and 2019-20, which encompasses our multi-year projection, should do that so I can hear, which encompasses our multi-year projection, the increase is about $3 million over the 3 years of our multi-year projection. And then another about $800,000 in 2020-21. So I think it's important to note that we are about a third of the way to the PERS increase that's over that, and about halfway to the STRS increase. So we're right in the middle of it. With that, we will obviously, with the multi-year projections, how that looks, we will have to be, or we'll be recommending forming a budget advisory committee in the fall to come up with budget solutions, revenues, and potential cuts that we would be looking at for the 2018-19 school year. One piece of, I've given some kind of, information that's a little bit of downer information, but one piece of good information, the state budget was passed, or the governor approved it. It'll be passed in the legislature in the next couple of days. It does include a little bit of one-time money that the governor, I think I noted in a meeting, that he had made contingent upon revenues coming in. The legislature pulled that back and has actually given us, and so that looks like potentially about $1 million of one-time revenue. But as we've noted, it's one-time revenue. It'll help our budget deficit in 2017-18, but we're still looking at the same out year scenarios. But $1 million is $1 million, and I'm not gonna. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Yancy. Trustees, Ross?
Thanks. So I'm looking at the chart that you have on the board. So each of these bars, and you circled the third one over, I think, no, the fourth one over, 16, 17, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That represents the contribution in that year and then for all time, right? I mean, if you go over one more year, it's that much and more. It isn't, what I'm trying to say is the additional cost to us is if you draw a line from the top of the blue over to the next column of blue, it raises by a certain amount.
Sorry, and you know what,
What
that's
I'm trying to say is if I draw a line from here to here, then next year we have to do what we did before and this much more. This is the total contribution.
No.
And then this goes on forever, right?
So it does go on forever, but this is, and to be honest, my slide is a little bit confusing. I apologize. This is the cumulative annual impact, and I should have known that. So we've had an increase in 2016-17 of roughly $2 million a year. So the cumulative impact of the STRS and PERS rate on an annual basis. So
right, so it's $2 million a year for every year.
For every year.
For this year and every year thereafter.
Yes.
But the next year it's more.
Yes.
And then up here, when you get to this year 2021, it's this much, and then it goes steady, steady, steady forever.
Yeah. So the STRS rate is set in stone, or it's set in not in stone. It's set in legislature. They definitely could increase it, but the PERS rate actually increases a little bit more, but the impact of the PERS rate increase isn't as significant because a majority of our salary is in certificated with our teachers.
Yeah, okay. So what I'm trying to figure out is if we're halfway through this, as this thing's growing, we're gonna see that for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years, we're gonna have the same kind of pain point where you say, oh, by the way, there's another 1% or 1.8% out of your general fund that has to go to address the retirement program for our employees that the state manages. So that's just gonna be very painful. I'm trying to figure out where I think we are, and I mean, what you basically said tonight was as presented, we're about $3 million in the hole over the year, and you're gonna try during the course of the year to figure out how to save some of that $3 million, but without further action, we spend our reserves down, and we're down to the point where we have $9 million, and in the next couple of years, we're down to $4 million, and if you go another year after that, we're almost down to zero. We're down below the state minimum reserves, actually. If you made this combined multi-year plan 4 years long instead of 3 years long, we would not meet the minimum state reserves.
By 2020, 2021, we would not meet the minimum state reserves
Below 3%.
below the 3% without action.
Yeah, we need to do something, right? I mean, and the
Absolutely.
right time to do something is as soon as we possibly can now that we've figured this out.
Yes.
So, I'm thrilled that you've made it clear that we have something to address, and it's clear to the community. This is a nice, crisp presentation, and we just need to start doing some really hard. I mean, we've done this before. It's going to be hard. There's going to be people who aren't going to get what they want, or programs aren't going to be delivered that we would like, or it's going to get hard. It's going to get real hard. So, thank you for the crisp, clear presentation. I appreciate it.
Trustee Miller, thank you. Trustee Mack?
Forgive me, I'm gonna be a little redundant, but I just want to make sure this is real crystal clear and real simple. And less a question, more just confirm that I got it right, because it helps me to restate it.
Yep.
But what I'm seeing, and forgive me, Ross, I'm gonna restate some of your
no, that's
stuff.
good. I
but
think
I just want to
spent a
hammer
bunch of
it.
time on this, yeah.
Yeah, so, $3 million deficit this year, 2.9. Okay, that's not good, but we have a reserve of about 9 million. Steady state dictates that's 3 years, it's gone. And that doesn't even take into account the restrictions on that 9 million that'll keep us from tapping into all of it. Then add on top of that, a lot more expenses are coming that we can't stop. Yeah, okay, that's it, that's pretty scary. So I'm hoping people are watching this. We gotta do some stuff, gotta do some work. Anyway, thanks.
Derek?
Okay, my questions are gonna, or maybe they're more about statements at this point, but when I was reading the Marin County Common Message, you had stated that the STRS payment was locked by the legislature, and I think to clarify, you mean it's fixed up to 2021, because the county says that the STRS board adoption of lower discount rates is going to lead to higher rates after 2021. So this could actually be a best case scenario when it comes to STRS. The rates actually, we should probably, so when we're having our discount advisory meeting, I think the written warning is it's going to keep going up at an exponential rate. So, but I wanted, you said it was fixed.
So I apologize. It's set in legislature. There actually is a little bit of a buffer. They're allowed. They can go up about another % by the STRS board. But with the, like you noted, with the STRS board's reduction of their discount rate, basically the assumptions that their return on their assets, as the return on their assets reduces, the only other thing you can do in this situation is increase contributions to cover those losses. So it likely will be that the legislature will have to take action again in the future to potentially increase rates.
Okay, so I'm hoping that when we go forward in our planning, we'll just assume that's going to happen because the discount rate that they've adopted is already sort of ridiculous. There's no way they're gonna get the returns that they anticipate. And it's interesting to point out that during the May revision that in spite of the fact that the state came up with an additional $6 billion to fund CalPERS, that $6 billion did nothing to reduce the rise in future contributions. So $6 billion into a black hole is what comes to us from our county common message author. So one of the questions that I had are about the rate and the dollars that we're paying. It's based on a percentage of our total payroll, or
Yeah, the total salary, and it's covered salary.
So is one way, I'm being facetious, but is one way to get the payments, these payments down is to lower our payroll costs?
Yes.
So essentially, if we fired everybody, we wouldn't have this obligation. We couldn't technically function that way, but I just wanted to make sure that since we're in declining enrollment, one of the results of declining enrollment is we'll need fewer teachers and staff to provide education in fewer classrooms and ultimately fewer schools. So there's no way that these two retirement boards could come back around and assess us an additional amount because we have fewer employees, therefore the percentage isn't enough to take care of the problem. So there's no way they can assess us for more than the percentage of our payroll.
Well, as the legislature works now, no. There's the only way they can assess us is on our current salaries,
Okay.
whatever they are in that given year.
Now, I had a question about the enrollment study you brought up.
Yes.
Sorry, when we were gonna do that in time for 18, 19, or what page? That was page.
So the reason I was noting that we didn't have a decline in enrollment in 1920
1920
was not for the fact that I think that we would be reducing in enrollment, but our staffing projections are directly based upon those enrollment studies. And therefore, if we are if you're looking at a 3-year overall basis, our revenues are set in that third year because of declining enrollment based on the 18-19 ADA that we earn. And so I wasn't going to pull out teachers or other staff at that point due to declining enrollment that I don't know if necessarily it'll be there or not. Once we move forward and we're moving and we have an updated enrollment study and we're moving on to look at the third year out being 2020-21, you will see the actual projected decrease in enrollment. So basically, we didn't put in a decrease in enrollment in 2021 so that we didn't decrease staff in 2020-21 that we didn't know if we would be able to.
Well, let's get back to the enrollment study. When are we going to do the enrollment study and by who? And we'll have those results in the 18, that's what I'm trying to get at, because you're basically saying we don't know, so I'm putting nothing there. A more conservative approach might be, you might not, but I might say, well, maybe we should plan to have some reduction there. But that's why I'm sort of trying to get an idea of, in the past, we've brought in, I forget the name of the organization, they've been
TSS.
fairly accurate in.
Total School Solutions. Yeah, and my recommendation would be every 2 to 3 years to bring in an enrollment study.
So when is the next one going to be?
So either, depending on, we will bring it either for December of this year or December of 2018.
Okay, so you're not sure yet, but I'm thinking the sooner the better. So this is a preliminary budget. We're kicking around ideas, what to do about it. I know we're going to have this committee work on it, but I'm thinking that we might want to talk about direction or have you get a little more certain about when we should do that enrollment study. I tend to think the sooner the better would be important. So those are my questions for now.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much for bringing this report forward. Certainly not the news we want to hear, but trustee Mallory.
When will we have a final budget to approve?
Next week.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't expect any significant changes from this budget.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, if I just,
Of course.
based on the recommendation, part of this is the Budget Advisory Committee, and I was just wondering, are you prepared to tell us a little bit more about the makeup of that and the work that's going to be involved and how you?
So we're working on that right now. We've been working in cabinet. As we noted in the second interim, we actually were doing work this spring to do some of we did the Braun lease. We moved forward with the reductions, the declining enrollment based formula based reductions in staffing that we did. And we started that work in cabinet, and we will expand that work, but we're still determining the best makeup of that committee.
Do you think you could bring a little more detail along those lines when we bring the adoption of the budget forward? I mean,
I can bring you a little bit more detail.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, trustee No. All right, well, thank you very much, and it's a staff report. We're going to move on to our next item. It's a public hearing, and so I'm going to open the public hearing regarding the 2017-18 preliminary general fund budget. And looking around, seeing no one that would like to address us, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'm going to move on to our next item is item C, and 2017-18 budget reserves. And Yancey, you're up again.
So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because of the ridiculousness that I think this is. This was part of the budget deal a few years ago that basically put a potential reserve cap. I don't hate the transparency that this is of noting why we need an adequate level of budget reserve. But I think the budget that I just brought you, the preliminary budget, shows a lot of the reasons why we need a lot. It's because of our budget reserve this year, we didn't have to make significant cuts to program going into next year. We can do a more measured approach. We also have declining enrollment. We have uncertainty at the state level. We have PERS and STIRS increases. We have facility needs. There's a lot of reasons why we need a budget reserve. But this is a requirement by the state that we do this, so that's why it is, and I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Questions? No?
So,
Okay.
well, I have a question.
Okay.
Is this particular requirement a result of the rider bill that was added to the budget a few years ago, limiting local school boards from setting aside and creating larger reserves based on some archaic formula of sorts? I mean, why are we required to do this?
This was a 11th hour addition to the budget a few years ago.
So a rider bill is something that's done
Yeah.
in conference, in the middle of the night, no public hearing. It's a deal cut in Sacramento. Okay, so that's the one we're talking about?
One thing I would, that's the one we're talking about. The one thing I would like to note is that
I
there's
just-
now a 72-hour requirement for budget bills to be, not just because of this,
Not
but
just
one
because
of
of
the
this one?
reason-
Okay.
But this is, I think the School Boards Association has been all over this one. CASBO's been all over this one. The transparency I'm okay with, the reserve cap and limiting your local control over what the school board believes is appropriate level, depending on the risk. It's the same reasons, the local control funding formula and this are directly at odds. But sorry, I won't go into any more.
No, this was.
Well, hold on a second. Trustee Nell, were you finished?
For now.
Fair enough, fair enough. Trustee Mack, we'll come back to you.
Just some clarity, if we could, on the assigned or designation funds, in particular, the LCFF gap funding uncertainty and the declining enrollment. Under what circumstances are those monies spent or used?
So in the multi-year projection that we have, those monies potentially would be used, depending on the actions of the school district going into the fall. But they would be for 17, 18, they would be used in terms of the gap funding uncertainty because of the budget deal that hopefully will be passed in the next couple of days. That won't necessarily be needed for 2017, 18. It absolutely will be needed in the out years for 18, 19, and 19, 20, given our budget situation. And then the declining enrollment, to be honest, it's going to be needed until we stop declining in enrollment.
Okay, so those aren't really restricted. If there's
Those
a
are not
need, we
restricted,
can. Okay, got
but
it.
they are being used right now.
Okay.
That we are comfortable going into 17, 18, knowing that we can make our commitments for the year.
Right. So really, the way I'm reading it, the full 9 is something we have justification to use if we're in deficit, aside from the 3% requirement, of course.
Absolutely.
Okay. And just want to understand that. Thanks.
Trustee Miller, Trustee Nell, should I be coming back to you, or are we done?
Well, I did want to address you state in the board report correctly, I believe, that the Nevada Unified School District has typically maintained a reserve of approximately between 15 to 20%, with the board's intent of keeping approximately 15% as a reserve, 15 being a crucial number. And if I remember you correctly, you said the current reserve here is around 11.3%.
So our projected reserve at the end of the 2017-18 year is projected to be at 11.3%.
Under our
So-
target.
Under our target.
So in addition to declining enrollment, everything else we've been discussing, we're going to have to find a way to get this reserve beefed up for what's probably going to be another batch of uncertainty or years of economic uncertainty. So just another reason why I wanted to know more about the advisory committee and the work that we're going to be doing, because I would suggest that part of that advisory committee's work include a way to get us back up to 15%. That you're nodding your head, so okay. Rest of the board, I mean, we'll hear it, but it's my opinion, and I'm stating it.
Everybody in this district has to work on getting us back.
Nobody disagrees with that, I don't think.
Everybody.
Okay. So no more questions on the
a
reserve
good-
reporting requirement.
Is that it? Okay,
Holy
very
moly.
good point.
Yeah,
Totally.
holy moly, we have-
Yeah, now's the time, as we've said before, but thank you for bringing this back. All right, we're on to our public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing on the 2017-18 budget reserves. Looking around the room, I don't see anybody who'd like to speak, so I'll close the public hearing. And we're on to item 8, our first discussion action item, 8A, Board Policy Administrative Regulations and Exhibit 7325, San Marin High School Stadium Light and Public Address System. And this is a first reading, first of 3 readings. And Superintendent Hogaboom.
Thank you, President Cooper. So we'll be bringing this back a few more times. We'll bring it back next week for a second reading, and then we'll bring it back in the beginning of August. So the only thing that really has changed much about it is we've had some conversations with San Marin about the lights at the softball field. So it seemed like if we had a PA system and lighting restrictions at the proposed football field, then we should include the softball field as well. So Leslie did some work with our athletic directors and administration to kind of find out what they're using. So we kind of broadened the wording. So it used to say like San Marin High School stadium lights. Thank you. And now it just says San Marin High School lights. So this is meant to encompass the softball field as well. We want to make sure that if we're putting restrictions on the PA system and the times of when the lights are on and things like that, we might as well cover the softball field as well. So that's what you'll see under the board policy. The first one says the only exception would be continuing to allow North Coast section dictated softball playoff games to be held at the Gary Gates Memorial Field, because that is the agreement that's in place right now. Evidently, we're probably one of the few fields that does have softball lights, so that's where some of the playoff games are held. So that's not changing that. It's just noting that that's an exception. And then if you look at the ARs, you'll see again in red on that first page the same thing. And then we added a section in red about softball playoff games. And I think we did add a section 15 softball games after daylight hours. So when you're going through all these, it's student conduct, non-student conduct, football games, soccer games, lacrosse games. So it adds in softball games after daylight hours as well. So we're probably going to need to do some work with the current softball PA system because I don't think we at present even know how loud it is. So we're going to need to do some work on that so that we can bring that in line with this policy once we adopt it and make sure that we're not blasting out the softball field noise. So that's really the only addition to this. So if you have any other suggestions or questions or comments, let us know and we'll make sure to add them in there. Tom.
Thank you, Superintendent Hogaboom. Trustee Miller?
There used to be public address system on the hardball baseball diamond at San Marin. I don't know if there still is. If it's, because the attendance there's only 2 very small bleachers, but there used to be once upon a time. And we need to figure out what we want to say about that is all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Trustee Mack?
I'll first address the question you had. It's my understanding, at least at Novato High, and I think at San Marin High, the PA systems that are used for the football side have an ability and an extra speaker turned around toward the baseball diamond to switch over.
That wasn't how it set up before. It was separate, I thought, but
Okay.
like I said, it's been a while, and
Okay.
I think there's nothing there now.
But what I just is there now. So that's
that's
yeah.
more information than I
Yeah.
have. Okay.
So Novato High, all you got to do is push a button and it does baseball, and it won't. And I think it can do all 3. You do home and away, baseball.
But this is just speaking to San Marin facilities.
San Marin's the
right?
same thing. I'm pretty sure it's the same setup.
So
I
the
believe.
question is, my question to you is, do we want to take whatever we learn about the PA system here and apply
do.
it to the Novato High campus?
Yes,
equally?
absolutely. Yeah, I
So
think we've
even
already
if
been
the
talking about
policy
that. But
doesn't
yeah.
say Novato High, we want to build a policy around the PA system for Novato High?
I think ultimately we should, but yeah, I don't want to kind of redirect everything. But
Yeah, no, I'm happy to
yeah,
just
yeah,
make notes and then at the end put a separate policy.
because they're ultimately they both had the same system, I believe. So, but the question I had about the policy is, and Jim, maybe I'm reading it wrong, but oh shoot, I'm in the policy, but I think it's in the AR as well. The first bullet that's got red mentions Gary Gates Field.
Mm-hmm.
The only exception would be continuing to allow North Coast, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
I would strike the rest of it, just say North Coast section playoffs for any sport, because San Marin could be hosting a North Coast section playoff game that doesn't involve them, a North Coast lacrosse game, soccer game that goes.
But I thought we excluded them already. I thought this field was only for the field was only for San Marin plays. I don't think the stadium is designed for
Okay.
playoff games from other schools.
Okay,
Just if our teams made NCS, then
Okay.
they had to
Yeah.
play there.
okay, I missed that.
Yeah, let's not open that can of worms.
No, I'm not trying to. I was just
yeah,
thinking they
right.
might host once in a while to make some money, but never mind,
Well, we're
for
not.
just them. But yeah.
They can do it at,
Yeah.
noon on Tuesday.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay, got it.
We lose way more than we gain.
Got it. But be happy to talk about the sound systems at the baseball diamonds. I know them well, so
Great,
whenever.
that's good.
So Ms. Benjamin and I will be having a follow-up discussion with you then. Well, and actually, I'm open to your input about whether you want to include Novato High in here as well. I mean, you might as well. Why would it be any different? I mean, it's a little more work now, but so what? There's no point coming up with an AR now and then adding Novato High later, so we'll just.
One's a day school and one's.
Under the facility use information that the judge uses with outside users, we do have PA restrictions. And so this policy sort of encompasses those PA restrictions, and the exhibit on this policy are those guidelines.
Okay, so I want to be sure that when we do that, nobody can go change the guidelines without bringing it back to the board for whatever stability this policy has. The judge can't change his mind next Thursday, and we have the parents in here on Friday talking to us.
Right, so I'm thinking what we can do on the website for a judge in the facility use is exchange it out for this exhibit, so it shows that it's a policy.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Thank you, Leslie.
Any other suggestions or
Trustee Butler.
comments?
Glad that you're gonna figure out the PA. That was my question, the PA for the softball field. But I also want to make sure it's clarified that the PA cannot be used during practice time or mowing the lawn out at the softball field. You know, the sound system and PA, I don't know that that's really clarified in here. Yeah, game only use.
Thank you.
And let's see, I have a question on the ARs and item 5, the PA system is, we mentioned in there it's not to exceed an L5, what they call an L5 sound level. Is that, and in the next paragraph it says, one of the bullet points, PA system volume will be designed and set to comply with the City of Novato's municipal code. Are those one and the same? Okay. And then one other thing on the next page, page 3 of 6, there's talk of the district, we're doing a great job of reaching out and holding ourselves accountable, I think, but with that in mind, the district will work with the Marin County Open Space Rangers to address any issues that might come up. Where is there open space that's right around, there's houses on, I thought there were houses all the way around. I just want to make sure we're not. So we're gonna monitor that whole hillside now? I think we just, my only thought there's gotta be a limit to how far we can have rangers or whoever policing. Just something to consider, I think, when you go.
Is that part of the committee work, or the
I mean-
committee meetings we held?
Yeah, it was about the open, Mr. Scheibel, he was, so maybe we can just limit to.
I guess it's,
wording about,
I mean, it could be interpreted to mean all the way to the top of that hill, and that's,
Yeah.
and it could be groups of kids that aren't related to our school, and that's all. I just want to have you guys look at that. Trustee Miller?
There is open space in the corridor from starting at Novato Boulevard just to the west of the San
Very
Marin campus.
thin
There's a
board.
trail that wanders right past our campus. The back fence of the houses ends, and there's about 20 feet that's open space, and then our fence, and that corridor down up through there is open space. So I don't know if that
You are right
affects
about
this
that.
discussion.
That's actually right. So it may be a matter of or defining that.
And, you know, I would love
Finding-
to have some policy about how we police that, but, because right now it's,
Yeah, okay.
I think the only people that ever there, you know, is
All right. well, that's-
cross-country kids run on it, I think,
Yep.
and some cyclists.
Anybody else? Any other questions or comments from anybody? All right, good. Thank you for doing this. This is good. I know it shows our responsibility. I'm glad we are taking full responsibility for running these lights in a responsible manner. And look forward to the second reading. And as an action item, I'd look for a motion on this.
Yeah.
Trustee Butler in a second.
So
Trustee
move to a
Miller.
second reading?
Yeah, move to the second reading.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
So that's moving to a second reading. Trustee Butler, Trustee Miller, second. All in favor? Passes 6 in favor and 1 absent. On to item B, board approval to hire a mechanical engineer to conduct a feasibility study at San Jose Middle School, and our Assistant Superintendent Yancey Hawkins.
Thank you. At the meeting last week, the board tabled discussion on the motion to move forward the San Jose air conditioning project, and the direction given to staff was to move forward with looking at alternatives, and the construction manager, Greystone West, noted that really the only way to look at additional alternatives at this point would be to hire a mechanical engineer to do that. It's estimated that this will cost about $15,000, and we wanted to bring it back to the board. So
I'm
that's
ready
it.
to move approval.
Hold on. Hold on one sec, trustee Miller. Is
So-
that the end of your presentation?
That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer
All
any
right.
questions.
That was rather brief. You
That's
took
your
me,
shortest
man,
one
that's
ever.
yeah. You broke a record tonight.
Jim's got me in a good place.
I'm just kidding. All right, trustees, trustee Miller, you had your hand up.
I'm ready to
Wanna
move
move on it?
approval when, after the conversation or
Okay,
whenever.
I'll call for a second.
Actually, I'd like to discuss.
Sure, we
Something.
can, do
So,
we have a second? And then I'll have discussion. No second? Okay, let's go to discussion.
so I wasn't here last week, so obviously I missed a bit. But where are we on the actual, whatever, the line item to the 2 point whatever million for the air conditioning? That's been
Not
tabled,
approved.
it's
Not
not
approved.
there, it's not approved? Okay, and the intention of this is to get more information to then make that decision?
That
What's
was
the
the
goal here?
intent. That was the intent to, we tabled that. There was sentiment that we didn't want to spend, or several trustees didn't want to spend that amount of money without going all the way down and making sure that we didn't exhaust all the other options, you know, passive solar, more insulation, white roof, whatever it might be. So the thought was, and Greystone West brought this up, that we could hire a mechanical engineer to come in and go over it as a professional and make recommendations, not knowing what, of course, what the results would be.
I'll just
Let him finish.
speak on my take on this. I'm not really keen on spending money on a consultant to tell us what we already know. I believe that the facilities committee already went through all this and already determined the way to do this, and now we're kind of just doing it again, and we're spending money to do it. I know it's not a cheap project, but it's what we came up with after months and months of working with that campus. That's their top priority. And perhaps when the actual estimate comes out and they do all the proposal of the budget the plan for building it, maybe it won't be the same amount, but I think we need just to decide if we're gonna do it, period, or not. Spending $15,000, I think we're just gonna learn what we already know. There's only one way to do it. That's my take.
Russ?
So we had the board met, you were not here. We discussed it for probably a half an hour. It was clear that the board did not see the rationale correctly, appropriately displayed. What the conversation did include is discussions of the kind of construction remedies that were put at San Jose that exacerbated the problem of temperature as opposed to fix them. Windows that used to have louvers were plated up with solid glass. The roofing materials had been downgraded, a bunch of various issues. So the board at that meeting, when you were not at, decided that they wanted this to be brought forward, and they said we'd bring a measure forward to approve this. So at this point, I'm going to vote with the intention the board that was seated here had, and there was not enough votes to approve it. There were only 3 votes sitting at this table who would have approved it, so it failed for lack of vote. So it's nice that you're here to talk about it, but my view is the board made a decision last time to do this exercise. They're not going to approve San Jose without this interim study. I won't approve. I'll vote against San Jose as an interim study. I believe Shelley will, and I believe Derek will. So you would have to have only 4 votes to approve San Jose. So I just think it's a request that was made by the board sitting in the session at a board meeting, and I think it's time to move forward on the $15,000 study. It gives us a way out of dealing with this issue at a reasonable cost. So I will make the motion to approve this measure.
Noted. Thank you, trustee Miller. Trustee Nell.
So I have issues with the funding source, the cost, and that's primarily why I don't like the motion, because it accepts the recommendation as is.
It does.
And I would rather, just kind of go over it a little bit.
Sure.
And get some some clarity. First of, so that's why, so, you know, the, as stated in the tonight's report, the board requested more information, and one of the requests that we asked for, well, I would contend that the board was not aware of the problem at San Jose. So, but what we were looking for were options, and I believe the answer that came back was there were no options. Correct me if I'm wrong, but, and so that's what drove the conversation of, well, how do we know there are no options? And then there was some detail associated with the operational cost, and we just looked at a preliminary budget and a disappearing reserve. And I don't want to make decisions that are going to have ongoing operating costs without being convinced it's absolutely necessary. So that part, I think we were able to determine last time that it was going to, there'd be a net savings because that we were going to take out the heaters that we had in there, go to heat pump system, and between the heating and the 20 days of air conditioning, we were going to net $20. It was going to cost us more than it costs us now to run the school. So that's why, and I was really disappointed with the options that were presented. It seemed to me that, you know, we had a reinforcement of a serious problem, but no really creative thinking or ideas. And then at some point, when we talked about, well, how can we get more specific about the options? I'm going to go to Greystone West, and we have a contract with them as our construction manager, and I'm going to refer to attachment A here. Essentially, which are fees on a per project basis, but what I'm getting at is this $15,000 number was cuffed by our Greystone consultant in public. He literally stood where you're standing there and shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, $15,000. And then a couple weeks later, you come back and it's $15,000. And I don't see any scope. I don't see any effort to go out and get this thing bid. So am I to assume that this $15,000 is going to come out of the Greystone contract that we've committed to paying them for the San Jose air conditioning, the construction management construction fees of $66,319.12, or, I mean, since we're already paying them to do this sort of thing, why don't they do it within the contract that we have with them, rather than hire a mechanical engineer to do the work?
So it would be outside of their contract. We don't hire them for mechanical engineering work. It's similar to soils work that we might do at a site, or additional feasibility work that we would do on a project to go back and make sure that we are looking there. The request for $15,000 isn't for a specific contract, but it was requested for a couple of reasons. Number one, the board had requested that a recommendation be made at the August 6th meeting, and staff did not believe that they would have a contract back in time for the board to approve before the meeting on the 20th that we would have had, and therefore we would have not been able to approve the contract until the August 6th, which is when the board had requested that information be back in order to keep the timeline of potentially doing the project in next summer. So I apologize, I didn't note that in there. We are noting it as an estimate of $15,000. We worked with bond counsel to discuss this. Since there had not been an approved project, the recommendation was to at least have the board approve something that says that they've looked at it. Bond counsel has looked at it, that is a appropriate cost out of Measure G, and that this would therefore, since there's no approved project and no approved budget, that this would be the approval that would be the, maybe not required by law, but is best practice.
So I guess that's my question. Why do we need to spend money outside of the scope of the project on this particular issue? And additionally, where does this dollar amount come from? If
This is a preliminary estimate from our construction management group, Greystone West.
Okay.
And they are,
The one that you just said we don't use for this particular type of thing.
sorry, that is their preliminary estimate of the cost. They are out now going and looking to get cost estimates on this right now.
So is this a not to exceed number?
It's an estimate of the cost right now. So if it would significantly
You could
change, I
probably
would
make a
bring.
motion to make it a not to exceed.
Well, I think that's a good suggestion, but I think, I hope that this isn't gonna be the case going forward on the rest of our projects, and I think what we're lacking here is some diligence, in delivering information and fulfilling the requests of the board, because you have to understand that, by law, we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that these dollars are spent wisely and appropriately. And I'm really more interested in trying to get this issue resolved within the context of the current proposal and not spending money outside of it. And I just honestly don't think that, on one hand, you're telling me that the construction manager, this isn't their job, but that's the estimate that we're using that, quite frankly, was pulled out of thin air at the last meeting. And I don't see anything, brought forward today that substantially provides me with a cost for an energy efficient installation and operation of a cooling and heating system for this size of facility. So I'm hesitant to approve the additional funds, or just have it be open-ended like this. I'd like to see a little more work on it.
What do you need, just a question? What do we need?
What I would like is for people to get a little more specific and put a little more effort into giving this board the information that it's asking for. And what I have here is just a reiteration of last board's meeting, and literally a cuffed number of $15,000 to come outside of the specified project we're talking about. I don't think we agreed to spend $15,000 outside of this particular line item. I think it should be part of the line item to start. And I also think that I would like to have seen some sort of actual scope of what this mechanical engineer was going to do.
So
And I expect that level of work going forward on all of these projects.
All right.
This is my second bond project with this district, and I know what happens when we don't press the specifics on these issues.
All right. Trustee Aguila's next, and do you have a response to that
I do. In consideration of the item was brought in lieu of some timing issues around the board's request for more information and the board's request for there to be a study performed and completed by the August 6th date. Therefore, we were working on the study and we were looking for a little bit more broad than we usually would ask for approval. Our executive director of facilities has been working on this. We do have a draft that we just received last night or this morning. And the scope, we do have the scope around the services that I'm happy to read that we received, but we did not have that information in time for the board packet last Friday. So if the board wants, I'm happy to.
It's not a lot of time to study and review prior to making a decision.
All right, let's hear
But
from.
I certainly would like to know what we know as of today. That would be helpful.
All right, let's hear from the rest of the trustees. Trustee Aguila.
So I was here last week, but I left early, which is something that I never done in 7.5 years. So I apologize for that. But I did see it on YouTube, and I just wanted to make sure, because I was absent, that I wanted to make sure that I understand the, the reasoning for bringing back the consultants. And so that was $15 to see if we did all our due diligence and if we looked at all our options. Right, so 2 reasons. Did we do our due diligence as a district and as board trustees? So I see the why trustees Scott went that direction. So the 2 reasons, and so I'm glad that we are doing our due diligence. What I'm not happy with is that 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 you're saying that it's coming out of Measure G. And this is money that, it's, our taxpayers, and they're giving this to us. Now, my understanding is that we can also take that money from, like the general fund, correct?
We could use any number of sources.
Not Measure G.
We could use Measure G, other facilities funds, or the general fund to fund this.
But then, okay, but then the problem with that would be that it'll be coming out of the classrooms, right?
It could be potentially seen as coming out of the
Like
classroom.
$1,
General fund,
and
you might
not
as well ask Aaron Fix for the check.
right. And it's not only like $1 from San Jose school. It's like it could be from all the schools. So it's taking away from all the schools. So it's not just San Jose to fix San Jose. That's not the problem, correct?
Yes,
Right,
I
okay.
believe it's a project
So,
cost.
So it's so my question, so if you look at the wording for tonight's vote, it says to obtain board approval to hire a licensed mechanical engineer to conduct a feasibility study at San Jose Middle School. Now, to me, that's not clear. So if we approve this, we're moving forward with the AC, and if we don't approve it, are we still moving forward with the AC? So it's not
It's a
clear.
study. We're going to approve, may I, Tom, may I?
Yeah.
Let me-
Yeah, please
Sure.
do.
I mean,
May I?
Yeah.
sure.
The $15,000 is for a study to determine the most economical way to meet the goal of reducing the temperatures in that campus. That's what the board concluded. That's what we asked for. How do you get the temperatures down? Maybe not air conditioning. And our best at council in the room said, if you give me $15,000, I can take us the next step and get closer. Now, for example, San Ramon's, the roof project, when we went out to bid, we were over our estimates by
$1 million the first time,
$500,000 is the best we got. And we said, for $500,000, we want to slow down. We're talking $15,000 here. We're talking not 500, we're talking 15. And this money will result in a better design, that's what we're asking for, a better design for the total project. So while there's a budget for the San Jose air conditioning, we don't know what the total cost is. It could be $500,000 off, just like the San Ramon roof was. So this is a little engineering piece that we've spent a bunch of time on, but if a little bit of engineering saves us $500,000 in actual construction costs, because we thought it through more carefully, to me, it's perfectly appropriate to take it out of Measure G, and it's perfectly appropriate for us to spend a little more think money before we do implementation money. So to me, this is a win-win. This is what I thought the board did a great job in discussing it and saying, we need to be more careful, and we made an agreement amongst us and the community. The project cannot delay the implementation of air conditioning at San Jose. And we knew we couldn't get it done this summer, but the project says get it done next summer. And our staff said, oh, they need it done by next summer. We need to get this moving. And so they came back in 1 week's notice, which is very fast, because that means it has to be in by Thursday into the agenda. They came back very quickly and gave us exactly what we asked for. And for us to sit here and say, $15,000, gee, that's a lot of money. $15,000 compared to what the project is going to cost is just enough money to be smart. So I get where we want better engineering, Derek. I absolutely agree. We want better engineering on every one of these projects. But I think we're kind of in the ditch on this particular one. I think the right solution is to move forward on this one, get them moving, solve San Jose's air conditioning problem. I do not want to be in the newspaper tomorrow morning with them saying we're not going to deliver air conditioning at San Jose or cooling. A better solution.
All right.
I think we would be better to get this behind us and then think through the exercise of better engineering.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Maria, can I ask
Yeah.
one question, kind of direct staff to talk about that? Mike, you're trained, you're a mechanical engineer, or you're a civil engineer, but I'd be interested in your opinion about kind of just your take on this. Would we be smart to spend money at $15,000 and to do this?
Based on the conversation last week,
Yeah.
You heard Todd Lee from Greystone talk about his experience with the restrictions we have with the current bones of the building, if you will. We didn't think there was any other options except AC to get effective cooling in the rooms. Now, we talked about the loss of passive cooling capability we had at the site that we've changed over the years for a variety of reasons. But in our opinions, we were both talking a lot about this. Because of the restrictions, if you add more passive cooling back into the building, if you mess with 5% or more of the exterior walls, it triggers a seismic retrofit, which is millions of dollars. So that takes that option sort of off the table. And otherwise, we just didn't see any other non-mechanical means of reaching significant cooling or sufficient cooling to reduce the temperature in the classrooms. But given the concerns of the board and understand the budget concerns as well, Todd last week offered, hey, and I believe it's a not to exceed $15,000. It's a per hour basis for a mechanical engineer. And actually, just to answer your questions about the scope of work, we would ask them to conduct site visits to verify the existing building envelope, mechanical conditions, create an energy building model for the school and the classrooms that do not currently have any mechanical cooling to determine the existing loading. They'd also determine the building envelope improvements or passive cooling that's needed or options that could be used to reduce the cooling load. Also do some energy simulations, determine potential cooling load reduction that various envelope improvements could have, which is those passive cooling options again. Also review potential options for mechanical cooling, which includes AC, and then produce a report analyzing these calculations and results that show recommendations. So we believe this scope of work for this study would provide you exactly what you asked for and give you all the options lined out with cost associated with them.
All right, fair enough. Thank you. Trustee Aguilar.
Yeah, so, I mean, I get it, and, you know, seeing the YouTube, what happened last week, and talking about it today, it's a little more clear. You know, I don't like it, I don't like that's coming out of Measure G, I don't want it to come out of the general fund. I don't like the $15,000 number. It's a $15,000 risk, basically, I think is what we're doing, because unless there's a guarantee that there will be, and can you talk about that? Is there a guarantee that we may find solutions to, in the long run, find things that are going to be cheaper?
There is no guarantee. This is just a feasibility study that will tell us whether there is any option other than mechanical air conditioning that would be feasible, and then at that point whether it would be cost effective to do that.
I just wonder why I get this feeling that why we wouldn't, that maybe we were missing information earlier, and why wouldn't this information be included in the original report? I mean, I just feel like, you know, we're spending this money on the consultants, but yet we should have had that information sooner with the original proposal, so that we wouldn't have to, or, you know, it would have included all the possibilities in the, I don't know, I just.
So staff and our construction management group, Greystone West, believe that that mechanical air cooling was the only option, in their opinion, was the only option to get the temperature down to those degrees. When the board asked some good questions around what options there would be, Greystone West said that the option of getting a mechanical engineer in there would be at that higher level of providing the board with the information that they wanted, and at a level higher than what they could provide. So that's why it wasn't provided in the original. But to get to that higher level of information or study, that is why we brought back this request.
I just wanted to make sure that we were doing our due diligence, and so that's why I voted that way the last time. So.
All right. Greg?
Yeah, just a quick question. and I just wrote it down so I can get it straight. But to what extent would the work that's proposed here be done anyway if we were to have approved the project in the first place?
So it would depend upon what came out of the report. If it came out of the report that mechanical air conditioning was, then a portion of was the most effective. Then a portion of that work could be used to help in the design. I'd have to.
Basically, the loading calculations would have to be done regardless for you put in AC. So we would save a little work we'd have to do anyway. So not all of the 15,000 would be just for the study. Some would be used and could be applied to the project should we see that AC is the preferred and only option.
And if by chance another solution was available, then obviously the legwork on that would be done as well. But you're not. I mean, you're
Not
a
necessarily.
portion of it. Yeah, well, a portion of it you got to do anyways. A portion.
Okay. Trustees? Trustee No.
Yeah, we got a couple things going on here. You know, one is this specific project and the circumstances that's got it to this particular point. So getting to the forest aspect of this conversation is, I hope we're going to be ahead of this on the projects that are coming before us in the future, because I don't want to do this every time. I'm sure you guys don't either. But I don't want to trust you. I want you guys to make sure that our vendors and our contractors and our consultants are delivering value for our dollars. And I'm not going to take anyone's word on it. I want evidence. And I want evidence on $2.4 million in air conditioning. And that's, and then to get back down into the weeds or the particular trees, I don't understand why we need to come up with another $15,000 when, as you just stated, this engineering is part of the project anyway, and we're paying companies to do that work anyway. Why don't we just have them make it part of the project? I suppose maybe that we would decide not to do it. I guess that could be one reason.
Derek, I think only part of it would be in the scope, because clearly if we're directing them to put in an air conditioning system, their scope is they're going to do the energy loading and that's it. They're not going to be looking at alternatives. So part of that cost, yes.
Well, that's,
not all of it.
I think that when we approve this, the facilities, management plan, it's clearly not all written in stone. So for all of us, to make a decision about whether we are going to do air conditioning or not, then obviously we want to do the best possible job. But if we can come up with alternatives that reduce that, then I want to know about them before we commit to a large contract like that. So it's at this point, I just want to make sure the dollars are spent wisely. I think that this $15,000 amount, there's nothing to back it up. We heard some scope described tonight, which makes me feel a lot better about it. And then at some point, some of it will be offset should we decide to go ahead with air conditioning anyway. So I'm of the position that we need to do the best possible pre-engineering as possible. Let's just take a look at the San Ramon roof as an example of our construction management consultant company telling us it was going to be this, and it turned out not to be that way. So maybe we need to sharpen our pencils and work harder on all of these things before we make decisions to go ahead with them. So at this point, I think we should move ahead with the study. I hope it doesn't come to $15,000, but I think we need to do the due diligence and then we need to come up with a way of proceeding on all these projects so this doesn't happen again when it's a theater or a science building or whatever.
Good comments. Trustee Aguilar?
Okay, I still want to go back to my question that I believe the objective for the voting is still not quite clear. It's to obtain board approval to hire a licensed mechanical engineer to conduct a feasibility study at San Jose Middle School. So that means we're moving forward with the AC.
No. It's a feasibility
So
study
that's-
to see if there's any other options. It's not,
But it's also not moving forward. It's neither moving or not moving forward. It's just to do the 15,000.
Getting an-
And it's not
it's
even
doing it-
15,000. We don't even know exactly.
and
But-
I think, given the information that our executive director, I think trustee Nell's point of a not to exceed 15,000 is,
Trustee
would
Miller?
work.
Excuse me, Trustee Miller, would you be able to amend your motion to? Okay, so that's on the table now, so good.
And then is it regardless whether we move forward or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we have a first, Trustee Miller, second is Trustee Nell. Is there?
Is
any
this
other
going to be
discussion?
Measure
'Cause
G funds?
Yes. it
That's the recommendation.
Okay. Okay.
And then Superintendent Hogaboom would like to add a comment too. Can you go first? Do you mind? Okay.
So just to review process here in general, because this is going to happen again. I know there were concerns from the board about air conditioning from the get-go, and people wanted to make sure that the money that was in the bond was used wisely. And the board some members of the board pushed on air conditioning. And so there were a lot of sites, including Novato High School and Olive in particular, that had air conditioning in their initial list. And when they were pushed and said, well, we don't have 500 million, we only have half that amount, they got rid of it because they had other priorities that were more important. But there were 3 sites, including San Jose, Linwood, and Loma Verde, that said, hey, this is important to us for whatever reason that was. And it was included in the facilities master plan. And I get that that's a general master plan, but the board should have been aware of the fact that it was included if you looked in there in those 3 sites. Then it went forward to the bond implementation committee. And that bond implementation committee, of which we trusted 50 people to take a look at that, San Jose came forward as one of the top schools because of the conditions at that school of why they needed it. And I get that it's the board's responsibility to have oversight and do due diligence to look that over, but you have a facilities master planning group at all those sites. You have a bond implementation committee, and I'm still good with the board overseeing it and saying, do we really need air conditioning? What I don't understand is that last time, because I feel like there's some members of the board questioning in terms of the staff report. I mean, basically, unless I'm not getting it, you either have mechanical active cooling, which is a 2.4 million system that's going to cost marginally more, $20 more per classroom because the heating's more efficient. So it's not going to cost as much more. Or you have active or you have passive. And I think you were given, what I saw was enough information last time that said that the passive system was not going to work. You looked at roofing, you looked at ventilation, we looked at why they covered up the levers because it was too cold in the winter. And then we also looked at the fact that you needed a seismic retrofit. So I guess what I'm unclear on is, to me, the staff did due diligence in terms of looking and seeing what the alternatives were. Yeah, $2.4 million is a lot of money, and maybe it's more than that. I guess I'm just unclear on what other choices the board thinks needs to happen and what due diligence wasn't done when you have an active system or a passive system. And frankly, I don't see how a mechanical engineer is going to throw any other choices out there that are going to alleviate the need for a $2.4 million air conditioning system. I mean, Ross, you're an engineer and I'm not, but what is the mechanical engineer going to show us that's going to say, oh, we're going to be able to do, we've already looked at roofing, we've already looked at all those other things. All those passive systems require a seismic retrofit. So I guess I just don't understand what other choices we're gonna look at that are gonna help us, that this mechanical engineer is gonna pull out of a hat and go, oh, you don't need to spend 2.4 million because we're gonna do X. Like, so what is X? So I guess that's where my confusion is, that I felt that the report that was presented last time was complete. I thought those were the choices. Again, maybe I'm missing something because I'm not getting it, but I just don't see what other choices are going to be offered at this point. So I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but I'm just confused as to what due diligence wasn't taken care of.
Superintendent Hogaboom. All right, more comments?
So, Mr.
Could we
President?
let trustee Butler, trustee Nell, we haven't
Just
heard from
the
her
fact
yet.
that we have a motion on the floor with a first and a second, I will be voting against this. I have from the very beginning. My thoughts haven't changed. I don't want to say too much more because I might say something I might regret. So I agree with Superintendent Hogaboom. He expressed it clearly. I think this is a complete waste. We are going to get the same result that we did from the very beginning. I just think it's not the way to go. And Trustee Nell, you expressed it that I hope this is what we're not doing for every project. I hope not too, because this is ridiculous.
Thank you. Trustee Mack, and then trustee Nell.
I just want to do whatever we got to do to get this project moving. And because I think we did all the due diligence, we know what we already need to know. It needs to be done. If it comes in at less than 2.4 million after we start doing some design work, great. But frankly, I think this exercise we're about to go through is going to be done in the project anyway. So
All right, good.
let's just get going with the project. That's my take. So I'm going to vote no on this as well because I want to see the project get going.
Okay, trustee Nell, and then trustee Aguilar.
So my question is for the superintendent. Are you withdrawing your recommendation?
I guess what I'm questioning is what exactly the mechanical engineer, maybe this question for you, Mike, what exactly is a mechanical engineer going to tell us that could prevent the need for a $2.4 million active mechanical air conditioning system? Because I thought last time that those passive systems were pretty adequately analyzed, and if they weren't and there was something else we didn't do, or the mechanical engineer is going to give us some other information, because I'm not an engineer, I have no idea what that is. So I guess what could they offer that's would be an alternative to going ahead with the air conditioning system?
It's my opinion that he's gonna come back with more details that, just like you said, gonna come back and point to the most cost-effective solution to cooler rooms to adequate temperature will be mechanical cooling through air conditioning.
Can you say that louder?
I'm sorry, the microphone thing.
Are you saying there's going to be
It's my
no
opinion
more
that-
difference?
He's gonna come back with the same, he's gonna have more definitive information and numbers to show you that for the amount of money, the only solution to reach the cooling effect in the classrooms is gonna be mechanical cooling through air conditioning, in my opinion. And Todd Lee, the construction manager, who's done a number of these projects, feels the same way.
So trustee Nell, and then I had a comment or two. Trustee Nell, if you want, or trustee Miller, if you want, whoever's ready.
I'm Greg, and I agree. I want to get this moving. I think starting engineering work now, and if we call it 15 grand or whatever we call it, most of this, at least half of what he's going to do is going to move us forward in this, and we start moving forward. We were not able in the prior 2 meetings to get agreement on this item. This particular item failed 2 meetings in a row. And I want to get it done, and I want to take care of the San Jose community. So I thought this was the solution coming before us tonight.
So-
If this fails, then I guess I'm not sure what comes back, but if this fails tonight, we're stuck.
So I
So
think
I'm going to vote for it, but mostly I want to get the solution implemented.
I think trustee Mack, just as I understand this, trustee Mack is in support, but not of the 15,000 of this,
I didn't support the project. Let's go.
whatever it takes.
Me too.
From the get-go.
Okay.
I'll spend 15,000 to get it started. I'll vote for this measure, but
All right,
if
I've
it
got some
fails, then
comments.
move on.
Trustee Aguilar, and then I'd like to make some,
Are you
I know I have to be loud.
are you changing your recommendation?
I mean, again, I want to move this project forward, and kind of like Ross, that didn't, last time it wasn't going to be there. So
I want to move it forward too, and when I went for reelection, I said my first priority was classrooms first, but also fiscal solvency. So, and classroom to me is first. So so I ran on that, I'm going by that. I just said earlier tonight that I don't agree with the 15,000. So my question to you is, are you changing your recommendation?
Well, the reason the recommendation is there is because there were some trustees, including trustee Scott, who's not here tonight, unfortunately, who I think felt that in order to vote for the 2.4 million in air conditioning, they needed to make sure that we had looked at every single option. I guess I'm looking at you too, trustee Nell, because if there's something we haven't looked at that you feel this is going to help you feel better about spending that money, then I'm happy to do the 15,000 to move forward. I'm just not sure what other information that you guys need that this is going to help you with. So that's why we made the recommendation.
Okay, so you're basically saying that your experience says that you may come back and not have anything new, right? So after tonight talking about I still stick to classrooms first. I'll vote to move forward without the 15,000.
The motion on the table is to spend the 15,000.
Motion on the table is to spend.
Yeah.
So if I can make a comment, I think that I'm totally in support of moving forward with the AC. There's no question about that. I have been all along. We had I don't know if we all are, Maria. I don't think we all are. But that's regardless. We can take a vote and find out. But I am in support of it. I think anything at this point to get us to that point, this has been it's a little bit of a hurdle. $15,000 is a lot of money, but then again, in the whole scheme of things, if it helps us refine what we're looking at and what our needs are and maybe another possible solution, great. But so I'm not opposed to spending that $15,000. I am going to support that to get us moving forward. Most of that money, I don't know the percentage of, you're going to be doing load calcs anyway, so some of that will already be, so let's say it's $9,000 or whatever, $8,000 that you're spending is above and beyond. That's a small price to pay in my estimation to giving us comfort level saying we did everything. We told the taxpayers in this city that we did it, we spent their money wisely, we looked at we turned over every single rock. So I'm ready to vote on that. I'm supporting it.
Did I call the question? Sure, I think. Oh, okay, fine.
One more question.
From him for a few minutes, and then Trustee Aguilar. Oh, sorry.
I have
Trustee Hill, do you want-
I have nothing to say. Well, my question was for the superintendent, and I think the recommendation still stands based on the circumstances, so.
All right, Trustee Mack, and then we'll go to Trustee Aguilar.
What's the process for bringing the actual project back for approval? One, could we do it tonight? Probably not, I'm guessing. We have to agendize and blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Correct.
But where is that process?
Nice thought, though.
So, we're talking about all this, but I would like to understand the steps beyond this to get this back on the agenda to vote for it.
So at the last
Vote
meeting.
for it tonight.
At the last meeting, the request from the board, it was discussed that anytime after the first meeting in August, if we hadn't made a decision, it could push back the timing of this project to be done next summer. So our drop dead date for approving the project to get done next summer was August 6th.
It would push it to 19 possibly. Right.
It could push it to
date
19
is an
in
18.
So it
terms
seems
of,
like you have two choices.
Yeah.
You either approve this item to make sure that all trustees, including trustee Scott, who's not here, who did really want this item, you go ahead with this and hope that it's not, you're going to save some of the money with it. So you would approve it. We'd go ahead with it. We would bring the recommendation from the mechanical engineer back on August 6th and see what he or she had to say. So that's one better to be safe than sorry approach that I know, again, trustee Scott's not here, but that's what she wanted to do, and that would have made her feel more comfortable. Or you don't do that, in which case we would probably, at your direction, bring back next week on June 20th, the motion to just approve the 2.4 million project. So those, seems like those are your two options.
But if August 6th, you talk about the report comes back, can we agendize the actual project at the same night? So we see the report. I know that's tight,
Yeah.
but I don't want to lose a whole year on this.
Yeah.
No, and it absolutely would be staff's recommendation that a decision is made by that point.
So this board needs to be comfortable with getting that report, reading it on the spot, and making a decision. None of this, hey, I need time to review it stuff.
Okay. Okay. Are we, any more further comments from anybody? I would. I know, I know. All right, if there are no more comments, I see, Derek, are you itching to say something?
I'm
so,
ready.
please.
I'm ready to proceed.
Okay, so I have a first and a second. All in favor of moving forward with our approval to hire a mechanical engineer to conduct a feasibility study not to exceed $15,000 at San Jose Middle School. And back by August 6th. All in favor of that?
1, 2, 3.
3. Okay?
That doesn't pass.
No, that doesn't get us there.
I think you need to do unopposed.
Okay, and then opposed? 3 and 3, right. Okay.
Doesn't pass, it doesn't pass, you need 4 to pass.
Well, you're right. She's technically right, though.
So I would, Mr. President, give us, Dale, I would like to ask that the full project be agendized a week from now, so we can consider it as full board. Because the problem has been, we've been short boards. And so we could, since you're doing agenda planning, could do that possible. I think we will. And then we'll make sure the full board's here. And then we can decide all 7.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. It's unfortunate. It was something that came up at the last minute, which probably can be, but, so yeah, we'll do that for next Tuesday. And we'll move on. All right. Good discussion, guys. I did want to, we have one more discussion action item, 2017 district priorities and goals. This is a draft. I did, however, get a blue card, and unfortunately, since we've already voted, Mr. Jolly, on this item, it would have to be, if we could have you come back, I know you've been 2 meetings now, to next Tuesday's meeting, because we've already voted on this item.
Can we hear his comments this evening?
Do you want,
I would, you think it was time to come down here, like you're.
okay, then come forward.
Just, Mr. President, these are comments on the
Comments
AR
on
and board
San
policy. which-
Yes,
We passed as the first reading and then we come back as the second.
it's item 8A on the agenda, trustee No.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, trustees. I appreciate the hard work that Jim, NUSD staff, and San Marin High School administration accomplished in hammering out these administrative regulations. I especially want to thank our Coalition to Save San Marin's great turnout at all 3 of the community outreach meetings. Despite continued opposition to the lights, our group showed up and measured up as good neighbors to listen, dialogue, and input. The ARs still have a little too many conditional words like may, okay, and consequences could be more consistent and strengthened and more defined for bad behaviors. But they are a good collective effort for now and will be strengthened as experience dictates. I am here tonight in the spirit of community outreach to ask for a binding community agreement for future expansion of the stadium. The ARs regulate use of facilities within the stadium, and for our San Marin community to feel safe and empowered, we need a binding project agreement focused on future use expansion of the stadium beyond the lights. The recent lights project has shown that huge, unexpected neighborhood change happens despite opposition and good dialogue. Trustee Millerick mentioned this at the 5:30 project approval meeting. And I know that President Cooper reminded us all not to be careful about binding future boards. Our group council has advised us that binding project agreements with communities have been and can be done as good neighbors work together to bind up community wounds and begin to reestablish trust. These ARs and the EIR are too easily changed for many of us in the San Marin neighborhood to feel fully protected against future expansion of the stadium. I would again ask the board to update the sound system and the lights focus at the Gary Gates Field and to bring them to present technology. Thank you, trustees.
Thank you, Mr. Jolly. Yes, trustee
For
Miller?
Mr. Jolly, you were not here earlier. The request to include the Gary Gates Field is part of the revisions that'll come back. So when you see those, you'll see some of the comments you've made. So we'll see you next meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. All right, on to our last action item. It's 2017-18 district priorities and goals. And Superintendent Hogaboom.
Thank you, President Cooper. So there's been, what I'm bringing is a draft of our initial goals for next year. And these will undergo revisions probably over the next few months. I rely a lot from our, not only cabinet, but our administrators to kind of help us as we get these in place. But I also, it's very important that the board weighs in on these priorities and goals as well. So they have changed even a little bit from what I sent to you last week based on some cabinet meetings. So what you had was kind of an initial list of just the priorities and strategies. You have kind of an updated list at your of this goals, and then we've kind of called them goals, strategies, and metrics. We're trying to simplify the district goals and not have as many and not be overwhelmed with data, but still maintain some measurement of how we're doing on the goals. So I think that balance is what I'm looking for input from the board. So again, we have our administrative retreat next Thursday, and we'll be talking about these goals and strategies and metrics some more. And I'll be talking about it with the board, obviously, in August when we come back. So what I want to show you is kind of the latest update. And, you know, I don't like PowerPoints, but I have to do this one anyway, just so the audience can see it as well. So again, we have a goal, which is fairly broad. We've got strategies, which are specific actions we're thinking about taking at the district level to achieve that. And then we've got some metrics. And we can always add more metrics, but again, I think the point is not to overwhelm everybody with so many metrics that we can't keep up with it, knowing that we will be reporting out on the LCAP and all that. So we've kind of, and this is again, we're trying again to align the LCAP, the district plan, the site plans, and these goals and priorities. So really we think that goal 1 and 2, which are equity and student success, can be combined because really student success and equity are all tied in together. So the goal that we put there was really the goal from our equity imperative, which talks about 2 things. One, that all students will demonstrate mastery of grade level content and academic and social emotional skills, better known as the graduate profile. And then the second part of that has to do with meeting the UC CSU entrance requirements upon graduation. So again, that's specifically the universal goal that is mentioned in our equity imperative. And then the strategies there, I think we've talked about this a little bit before. Equity would really, the National Equity Project would really concentrate on our secondary schools and working with the leadership teams and providing coaching for the leadership team, and then also providing for 2 Leading for Equity institutes at each high school, so we can expand the kind of awareness to not only our administrators, but to parents and students and teachers and office staff. And then the last one is, that's actually not on there, and I'll get you the full National Equity Project proposal, was to do some training with coaches here at the district office so they would sit in on some of those meetings. Again, the whole point with both the National Equity Project and the Buck Institute and Kevin Clark is to reduce every year significantly the amount of support so that we can train ourselves. The second kind of new part of the equity strategies is to use Nancy Dome with Epic Education to work with all of our elementary schools. She already does work with the 4 P3 schools through the Marin Community Foundation grant. She's been doing a lot of work around cultural competency and equity walks and learning walks and things like that. So as I mentioned, we did receive a grant from the Marin Community Foundation to release Bonnie Barron, who's probably one of our most adept principals at using the strategies from First School and the Marin Community Foundation grant. And so she will be working with Olive and Rancho, Pleasant Valley, and San Ramon to kind of spread those practices. And the cultural competency work is one of those main areas in addition to data. So that's kind of our strategies for expanding equity, so we make sure we get the equity from an awareness leadership with our principals phase down to our teachers and to our students as well. And then under student success, expanding student voice and making sure we really get better input from students about what needs to change in our schools. Grading and report card revisions, we need to look at, we need to revise our elementary standards-based report card, and also look at maybe adding our middle schools to that, and just looking at our grading practices in general, which frankly in some places are archaic, and that's because our teachers don't have necessarily assessment literacy. So we've started that training with our math teachers, and we'd like to expand that to all of our math teachers to review their grading practices, so that we do allow students to turn in work late and they can revise work. We don't average and put a 0 for Fs and some of those other best practices of grading. Performance assessments. So Justin Wells helps us with our district leadership team. He's with Envision Learning Partners. What a performance assessment looks like, what our portfolios look like, helping us with things like student-led conferences and that kind of thing. Benchmark assessments, again, how do we know if our students are hitting those milestones? The content focus for students, math is again the key area because we're still struggling with math. So those would be the key strategies, and then you can see some metrics there. And so the 4 metrics would be looking at our A to G requirements and trying to make sure that more and more students are hitting those. 3rd grade literacy by looking at our MAP scores, and then 8th grade readiness for algebra. We look at MAP, Common Assessment, grades, and MARS. And then the graduate profile, where we're going to be piloting some 5th, 8th, and 12th grade assessments next year. So that's the kind of the goal and the strategies and the metrics for equity and student success. And then the goal for staff success would be that all staff receive the appropriate support and resources in order to create the conditions to ensure student success. So that's, again, a pretty broad goal. The strategies would be next year looking at a teacher and principal evaluation tool, which actually Aaron Fix mentioned to me last year that we don't have a strong system right now for doing that. Oops, I guess I should be keeping up on this thing, huh? See? There you go. I get all caught up and wrapped up in it. All right, here we are. Teacher and principal evaluation. So I don't use the principal evaluation tool that was developed by Pivot, and frankly, I'm not sure if our principals are using the teacher evaluation tool because it's lame and it doesn't work and doesn't give people effective feedback. And so we would get a committee together to revamp that and get something that's effective and helpful for teachers and principals to do a better job. That's one. We would continue with project-based learning. We will have everybody trained by next year. As you heard Yvonne talk about, we had a bunch of teachers in PBL 101 and 201, and we'll offer that again in August, and then I think one more time. The district leadership team will continue to look at the performance assessments and work together to implement those. And then the thing that I added is this P3 First School expansion. So the Marin Community Foundation is giving us about $65,000. That'll release Bonnie to help go work with the other schools on those key practices, which are basically cultural competence and then how to use data well. And I think you guys were pretty excited, as I was, about that EduSnap data that showed the percentage of time that students in the classroom are spending either as a whole group or individually. And so Jan Derby is really good with that data as well. But we need to do a better job of using data to get deeply into what's working and not. And another area that Yvonne mentioned was our African American students. Their scores across the board are abysmal. You also know that our Latino students' scores across the board are abysmal as well. So we've got to look into exactly where the data shows about what we need to do differently for those students so we can be more successful. So the metrics on that would be learning walks to assess implementation of student-centered instructional strategies, all teachers being trained in PBL by December 2017, and then getting feedback from our professional development time, which are every Wednesday, and then also on professional development days. And then finally, goal 4, which is community involvement and engagement. Each site will develop and maintain positive parent, student, and community involvement and engagement. We'd use our district advisory committee for that, parent involvement. A new area there would be teacher housing. On the consent agenda tonight is a response to the grand jury report, which basically is a countywide issue, and we've had that E2 committee that's been looking at that in terms of what are some different ways that districts can help provide teacher housing. So that needs to be a focus that we look at next year. So we'll need to look at how to do that. And then the metrics for that would be, again, the LCAP survey, which is a lot of information from parents on what's working. PK, which Parent Institute for Quality Attendance, for Parent Institute for Quality Education attendance rates. I just went to the Loma Verde PK graduation about 3 weeks ago. There were about 25 parents, primarily Spanish-speaking parents, and I can't think of a better program that really helps our Spanish-speaking parents to kind of understand school and GPAs and A to G requirements and all that. And really empowers them. And a lot of those parents end up being on the ELAC and the DLAC, and hopefully in getting more involved with our regular PTA. So that's a very strong program. And another way to measure it would be volunteer hours. I mean, our charter school does a great, fantastic job, and charter schools in general do a great job of involving parents, so we need to learn from them as well. So possibly working with Nikki, because that's kind of what charter schools are all about, right, is the parents are involved in that. So I think we need to find better ways of getting our parents more involved in our schools. And then finally, stuff that's continuing on next year anyway, the dual immersion program. So we will, so we're getting up to opening that in the fall of 2018. The district committee will continue to plan and give you guys updates on what we need to do with that. The One to World program, which we all know I think is a key aspect of support for our students to give them access to technology. College and career readiness, which is Get Focused, Stay Focused. That'll start next year. Clark Consulting will be working with groups of elementary teachers and really getting them up to speed. We think that that's going to have a huge impact on our EL students because, frankly, we weren't doing what we should have been doing with our EL students. They were supposed to be getting 45 minutes of designated time, and that wasn't happening across the board. So it will be now, thanks to Yvonne and Julia's work with that. But it also, that a lot of the teachers didn't necessarily have the strategies they needed to be using. So I think that's going to pay huge benefits for our EL students. Saturday school support, again, Yvonne brought that over from Napa, but that allows us to do both intervention and enrichment on Saturdays. And so we kind of, I think, just scratched the surface with what we could do with that this year. And then I know the board, because you've told me a lot of times, is very interested in concurrent enrollment with College and Marin, and I think that while Get Focused, Stay Focused is a good start, we need to do more of making sure that when kids graduate, hopefully they have maybe up to 12 units of college credit by the time they do that. And I think it also just even Get Focused, Stay Focused, they'll all get a College of Marin, I think, pass. They're enrolled at the College of Marin, and hopefully that will lead them to take more classes there so they say, hey, I can be successful at this as well. So we'll continue to try to get more classes either on our high school campuses or find ways to get more students out to Indian Valley College. I mean, I know we've all seen their awesome auto program out there. We've got to get more of our students over there because that's a state-of-the-art technology. And that's that. So any input, ideas, suggestions, how does it look? Is it too detailed? Is it not detailed enough? Do you want more metrics or less? So again, these are kind of our broad district goals, strategies, and metrics. And then the schools, they will have their own strategies and metrics and goals as well that go along with that.
All right, that was perfect. Thank you. Trustee Mack?
Jim, thanks. Generally speaking, yeah, this looks great, and I think it gets us on the right track, so thank you. Just a few questions. Having just gone through the concurrent enrollment process for the past 2 months, I have a few experiences that we might want to work on. I shared this with Shelley, and I'm sure Shelley would share it with Ross as well. It's a little bumpy. If we could work on smoothing it out. I think it required a total of 3 signatures, 4 trips, and we still weren't sure we had the class. But the good news is I saw his College Marin student ID card today, so it's very cool. But also, too, it's a little disappointing that Spanish 101, which is probably one of the most popular courses we could ever take, especially for MSA kids, as you know, is only offered in Kentfield, not offered at IVC campus. That was frustrating.
Let's have a conversation
She
with
brought
the
it up.
college president and see if we can
She
get
brought it
that.
up already yesterday, so, yeah.
I mean,
But- so that's
is
something
what
to
they
work on.
promised they would solve, so
Right.
that's on them.
Okay.
That needs to be addressed.
So
Yeah.
we'll work on that. PK, attendance, love the program. What really caught my attention today, though, is the test results that we're seeing on the initial, Julia, with the pie charts, the colors. What caught my attention was the African-American performance issues that we're seeing, and I can't help but think that are there some strategies that we have such as PK in the English learner world that we can start extending to. I mean, there might not be an English learner situation, but certainly the same issues are there. And is there a PK equivalent for non-English learners, as an example, but kind of extend that all the way out? Because I think we're seeing some great improvement in the EL world. Let's take what we've learned there. And then equity, top of my list as yours. I fully support everything that we're doing there. It's just with budget pressures, I'm concerned about consulting expenses, and I know we're kind of ramping things down. I just want to better understand, so I know we're talking about instructional leadership teams. Is that district-wide or site-specific?
So every school has an instructional leadership team.
Right.
I think some of those are used more effectively than others, kind of like our school site councils, frankly. Some are used more effectively than others. So that's going to be one of our big pushes with our administrators this year is how are you using your instructional leadership team more? How can you use them more effectively? So that's specifically what the National Equity Project will be working with those teams at the secondary level. At the elementary level, it'll really be Nancy Dome helping to work with those teams as well.
And, okay, which helps me understand it. And it sounds like we're on a process of kind of teaching ourselves on how to execute these programs, which is perfect. On the Nancy Dome stuff, the coach, is she going to be coaching, or I'm not sure, her program, going to be coaching with more of the site leadership or the actual teachers, or kind of varying by site, or?
So yes, what she'll be doing, so she's already done a lot of work with 4 of our schools that are in the MCF grant. So she'll be doing work with the principal and the leadership teams, but then also working with the staff as well. So there'll be I think there's 3 days of training Dana will bring her 3 or 4 teachers on the equity team as well. All those other 4 schools, same thing, the principal and those 3 or 4 teachers. So they'll be helping them to be kind of like the trainer of trainers, but then she'll also do some work with their staff. So maybe she'll go to their staff meeting and help some things with culturally relevant pedagogy and things like that.
So more train the trainer approach, which
Right.
is perfect. Okay. And lastly, I promise, last question. You mentioned Bonnie is going to be kind of leading a lot of these efforts. Is that going to change her role as principal?
Yeah, so she will be she'll be co-principaling with Jennifer Dudley. So Jennifer Dudley has her administrative credential. Jennifer runs our Camp University program during the summer. Did a great job with it last year. She's also the facilitator and literacy coach at Lou Sutton anyway, so she's been doing a lot of the P3 work, and we think that she's a great choice to kind of be a co-principal with Bonnie next year. So basically, Bonnie would be there like Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Jennifer will probably be principaling Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Trustee Miller and then Trustee No.
Thank you, Mr. Hogaboom. I think this is a great, clear, focused document. Everybody can get through it. Everybody can understand where we're going. I have two comments. One is around mathematics and the exercise that you're proposing doing, which is reviewing the grading structure and the grading policy so students can succeed based on if they finally learned the material by trying the third time as opposed to getting an F on the first time and then everybody walks away from them and leaves them in the middle of the pond with no help at all is, I very much appreciate it. It's, let's measure success. Let's not structure failure. So that's, I'm thrilled. And the second is, I'm interested to hear more, not tonight, but the notion of restructuring your evaluation of our principals and the principals' evaluations of the teachers to give them more tangible, specific steps that they can take to improve their practice. I'm glad to hear, and I'm sorry to hear the pivotal report didn't work out, but better if we recognize that and replace it with something that does work. And I'm thrilled to see that our leadership is stepping up to work on educational practice across the system. And those are my two comments.
Great, thanks. Trustee No?
Yep, thank you. So, following along somewhat what Trustee Butler mentioned earlier, I'd much rather be discussing this topic for an hour than whether or not our construction management company is doing its job. So, moving on. I too think that this is a great start and a good job, and appreciate the work that you put into this, and I look forward to implementing as much as possible. I did have a couple of questions working down the list on the equity side of things. The metrics that you have here are there, but could we point to any specific budget items that we are spending, in the sense of when we do equity, we got those three different size boxes. So I guess it's about the same amount of square inches of boxes as the three equal boxes on the other side. But, when I'm still looking for a little more resources, money directed at the kinds of things that might make a difference. And I'm counting on you and your staff to come up with what those specifics are. I appreciate the fact that other agencies like the Marin Community Foundation come up with dollars for us to support individuals we can pull out and they can work on the training aspect and so forth. But at some point we're going to have to get down, whether it's math or figuring out the concurrent enrollment issue. Appreciate you asking that question a little earlier, Trustee Mack. I had that on my list. So I'm hoping that at some point we'll put our money where our mouth is when it comes to the equity issue. On the student success, the student voice part, how will I know when looking at the metrics that we're proposing here that the student voice is having an impact? Because if you don't mind, I'll just kind of, it seems like we're saying we're going to talk to them, but then what are we going to do with what they tell us? Mm-hmm. That part, it seems a little kind of like, and I think it's important. So I really appreciate your wanting to work with the Youth Leadership Institute, which has got a great reputation for these kinds of things. They probably have a ton of ideas, and I'm sure you'll bring it forward. But on the metric side, and I don't even, unless it's in here already, but how would I know that we're having success implementing the student voice side of things in our success strategy? So.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and right now we don't have that, so we'll need to work on that. And it could even be as much as, I think I've said before, I think we're doing student voice light, and I think we're getting going with it, and we're trying to, like with a lot of our initiatives, go deeper with it. And George Pegalo, I just met with him yesterday because he's the student voice champion. He's always haranguing me because he doesn't think it's that hard and we need to do a better job of it. So probably what we can do is maybe track, especially at the secondary levels, maybe track the ideas and suggestions that the students come up with and what we're doing with it. And he keeps telling me that San Rafael and Terra Linda are doing a much better job than we are with student voice because he's leading those initiatives. And so,
Can't have that,
I
so.
take that a little bit with a grain of salt, but I think he's got some ideas. So I think that, we'll work on that, and I appreciate that. So to honestly answer your question, there isn't a metric for it, and we need to come up with it. And again, maybe we can track the initiatives that the students come up with and then what that leads to.
I hope so. So I had a couple other questions, but sorry. Okay,
Go
so
ahead. Finish up.
on staff success, it's on the evaluations, and I wanted to have an understanding of how that can we just change that, or is that not a negotiated item? It's somehow.
The teacher evaluation?
Yes.
Yeah, we'd work together with Aaron and the NFT and, get a group of 10 teachers and, 5 administrators together and sit down and look at different models and then recommend one. So that's kind of a joint thing, yeah.
So the goal is going to be for you to work with them on coming up with something. It's not working for anybody. That's kind of the consensus
That's the
right
general
now.
consensus, I believe, yes.
But at some point during negotiations, this is like contract language stuff that we'll have to put into the
I think it has to be it has to be
adapted or
voted.
addendum.
It's got to be voted on, yeah.
Okay. So I just want to make, that's a process part of that particular thing. I think it's a good idea. I think from what I hear, nobody likes the current system. It's not getting it done, so we should throw it out and come up with something new. So that's a great suggestion, and I look forward to that. Also wanted to commend you on community engagement just in general. I think that this district's doing a lot better at that since you've been at our helm, and I want to acknowledge that. Also, it's the kind of thing it's really tough to measure or assign metrics to. So, but I don't want to lose momentum, and I don't think you do either. And I think your measurement ideas are good. And in particular, I was wondering if we could expand a little bit more on the volunteer hours part. From a pure metric standpoint, were you going to create some way of saying we had 10 parents do these many hours this year, and next year we hope to do 15? Or are you talking about creating opportunities for parents and community members to engage more, like create positions, or I won't say internships, but specific roles? How are we going to do more volunteer hours or have more community engagement through volunteer hours?
Yeah, well, I think the metric is just keeping track of that. So if you look at, I'm just picking Lou Sutton, how many volunteer hours did they have this year? How many did we expand it to next year? So it's a quantity thing, but it's also a quality thing. Nancy Dome, again, worked very closely with Bonnie and her leadership team this year they did a parent night that was very, I think it was pretty innovative. They got a lot of parents there, and it's almost like student voice. They really sought out input from parents, and they had 3 or 4 different rooms, and they were asking them some really specific questions. It's almost like the focus groups we did here. So I think there's other ways to get people to volunteer and be active in this school, and we just need, so it's both what they're doing, and then again, I think how many hours we're getting out of them as well.
So, just to follow up on that, if I understand, I'm not aware. Do we track volunteer hours now on a site-by-site basis?
Yeah, I think the community liaisons, one of their tasks is to keep track of that.
But that's specific to it.
And the PTA, yeah.
Okay, so that's a metric that we have now we can do. So, my thought is not, you described parents showing up to a listen and learn. What I'm wondering is if we listen and learn, but are there things that they could do? We could ask them to do. And I know it's quality, because you don't want to have a bunch of people just showing up and they're really not effective or anything. But so I guess if you're measuring hours, that means there's a matrix somewhere that I could see that says these parents spent these hours doing this. Is there some way to expand that list of what it is that they're doing so that we can get more people working on whether it's facility improvement or tutoring or raising funds, but that's what I'm looking for. Expansion of things for people to do. That's my initial comment, so thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Aguila.
Yeah, also with volunteer hours, I totally agree with the importance of both quality and quantity, and I think both are just as equally important. And I'm glad that we're keeping track. And I just wanted to talk more about the. For a while now, I just been thinking that our students are just doing wonderful. And you know, with in one of our elementary schools, we had a student that did 1,000 hours, and it's just amazing. And so 1,000 hours. This was in Sinaloa. And it was San Marin. San Marin. That's what it was. That's what it was. San Marin. I'm sorry. And so that's just amazing. So I'm just wondering, should we raise the bar a little bit, and you know, more, and then and then how do we know that we are doing enough outreach to other community partners regarding that? I know Nevada Youth Center is really good about that, and you know, should we go back to the list of our partnerships and reinforce the importance of doing volunteer work and how it brings happiness to the students' lives and also feels a requirement to graduate?
One area that I think we can do a better job is with the Marin community volunteers. So I'm going to be working with our contact person. I went to their lunch that they had, which was out at the Peacock Gap golf course or whatever. Because I think a lot of our parents might not know how to get involved, and certainly the one need I'm hearing a lot for is mentoring and tutoring and all that. And I went and talked to that SIRS group that Jeffrey Valiant is a member of, and I think those guys are a great example of somebody, or even Rotary sometimes, who want to get involved, but they don't know how to do that. And so I haven't done a good job. So I think Leslie and I are meeting with that woman who, I forget her name right now, but to kind of get that going with the Marin community volunteers to get that expanded and make sure parents are aware of how to get involved with that, because mentoring, I think, is a huge need that we have.
Yeah. So no, I think we're heading the right direction, and I like this, and I'd like to make a motion if it's an action item.
No, it's just for input, because I'll be bringing this back to you guys again in August with kind of a final list, and we'll make sure that any other ideas you
Well,
have.
it's an action item actually technically, but to approve the draft. Whatever.
So I motion.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, trustee.
Yeah. And then Trustee Butler?
Okay. Yeah, I like what I see. Thank you so much for bringing this. I've said it before, but we rarely have gotten this in the past at this in depth. Normally it's a couple sentences and we just sort of figure it out, but you really make it easy for us. And I know that a lot of work you had Cabinet look at it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And did principals look at it as well?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, they
with
looked at
all
it
of
once
that
and they'll.
input, it helps us, you know, we don't have too much more to go. The only thing I would say, and I agree with Trustee Nell on student voice, we need some sort of metric. With the P3 first school expansion, I would request to rewrite that goal or strategy. It just, when I read it, if I didn't know, if I was somebody who was not familiar, I wouldn't know what that really all meant. And we already know that, you know, Bonnie's a definite go, but what are we gonna get? What are we getting from that, I guess, is what I'm.
Yeah, we can get that. Bonnie can help us get that
Yeah, some
quantified
sort of
pretty easily.
rewording, so. And then and I did have a question with the volunteer hours. I mean, I could really, personally, I don't really care how many volunteer hours. I don't know if that's gonna tell me anything as a metric. PTA already does that. I'm looking more, and I like the thing about, I guess, how are parents being involved in the schools is more. Do we have parents, you know, a significant number of parents showing up at parent nights at school and parent nights here that we hold? Are we, are parents participating in all the district committees we have? Do we have people, continuous participation across the board at the district level, at the school site? And I don't really care about volunteer hours. I don't know if that's gonna tell me that it's succeeding or not, so.
No, that's a good point. And I think when we put volunteer hours, it would also include those, like how many people come to their PTA meetings, how many people come to back to school night or open house, or how many parents are on district, committees. We need to quantify probably PK too, like how many parents were part of that. Was it 12 or 50 or how many there were? So it's kind of all that.
Well, expand on that, because I'm, if you don't, I'm sorry, but on the, I
just had
was
some
trying to add on to it's not the hours from my perspective, it's what are they doing? And, like I said, it's great that we have these listen and learn things, but, some people just want to show up and clean out the gutter and help and be, or pick up the litter
For
or
a couple hours.
paint a wall. And they want to be involved, but they don't necessarily want to go to a seminar either. So that's
So,
smarter people than I, but I mean, it's more
Number
about
of-
what they're doing.
Increasing the number of parents in the classroom and using that Marin Community Volunteer, if we could up our participation as community members and parents, that would be significant for me.
Trustee Aguilar, do you want to wrap that up? And then I have a couple comments.
yeah, I think that's significant for everybody, and I think this board is really strong on community engagement and parent engagement. That's not a question. So the reason I brought it up was because I think that I'm very proud of our students, and from the very beginning, I just felt like the hours that we require, and I said earlier today, it's quantity versus quality, and that I agreed with that. So, no, it's not about the hours. I'm just saying that I think that we could raise the bar for them because, I think they're better than we think. I think they're more capable than we think, and it might be time to raise the bar.
Jim, I'm really, really happy, as we've all made some good comments, but I think you've done a good job of starting this off for a draft especially. The performance assessments on the first page, can you talk a little bit about those? We're going to pilot performance assessments.
Yeah, so performance assessments are kind of real world ways that students demonstrate their skills. So you could do a student-led conference would be kind of performance assessment. You could have a portfolio. You could have a exhibition. One of the things that Matt's looking at Novato High School is through biology and English, I think, at the end of the year, coming together with a project. And Julia, do you remember what that one was? That anyway, so it's like the student speech, the sophomore speech contest. Those kinds of things where the student, by giving a performance, is demonstrating their skill in a particular area. So it's something that the arts and music and drama already do naturally, and sports to some degree. So again, if we're looking at students demonstrating the 6 C's, what's a way that they can do some project presentation or assessment that shows that they've mastered those?
I love it, great. Okay, and then I like the fact that you added these metrics in, thank you very much, from the previous version. That's good to see. I would like to see some focus put on the teacher and principal evaluations. I think that's kind of where the rubber meets the road for me. I'm really happy about the P3 expansion, and I appreciate Debbie's comments on that. And I look forward to having NBI on the list of continued programs. And I do have one question about your cover report. It says, next year we plan to set specific milestone goals for key areas such as literacy mastery. When is that going to happen? It just says next year, but why are we waiting until next year?
Well, that's really what we're kind of looking at. That's really the first one was metrics for goal 1 and 2. Kind of the biggest key milestones, as we said, I think were and looking at kind of the Marin Promise and some other research, in addition to the National Equity Project, is readiness for kindergarten is one, which we haven't really quantified yet. Third grade literacy, which we use MAP pretty much. So how many of our third graders are reading where they need to be? That's the second one. Eighth grade readiness for algebra would be a third. Something about the graduate profile that shows that they're ready for college and career. And then the last one would be A to G requirements. So those are kind of the key big picture milestones that I think in any system that you'd want to be hitting that kind of show all the way through that kids are successful.
All right. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Back to the board. Are we ready? Would someone like to make a motion and a second? And the first is just, okay? Okay. Okay, first and a second? Yes. Just as it appears. So we're approving the 2017-18 district priorities and goals. This is the draft, as it says. And I've got a first and a second. All in favor? That passes 6 in favor and 1 absent. And with that, that concludes our meeting. We will be here once again next Tuesday for a regular board meeting. It's 7 p.m. open session. Thank you.